221. Even if any one of the Black Order would be beaten in front of Gao Li, it was only because Gao Li was so overwhelmingly strong. In truth, they were top-tier powerhouses in the universe. Don't even think about leaving. Chala spat blood, half kneeling in the dust as he shouted, but he couldn't hold Supergiant back. Her spatial power was slipping out of his reach. Supergiant gave him a cold look and activated her mental transmission, preparing to teleport to Thanos for backup. At once the air twisted and a brilliant blue light flashed. Someone else had triggered a spatial ability here. With a thunderous crack, Supergiant, already flickering in and out of existence, coughed up blood and was hurled back by a shining, rocket-shaped holy blade. She had been forcibly ripped out of her transmission. "You bastard! Where's Gamora?" she spat. As the blue light expanded, the Guardians of the Galaxy, led by Rocket, warped into the scene, all furious. "Rocket, why are you here?" With Thor's help, Gao Li found the fight easier and even had the leisure to ask Rocket. Before the battle, Gao Li had wanted to call his friend. The cosmic team was a rare, powerful asset. But for some reason, he couldn't reach Rocket. Thanos arrived quickly, and Gao Li had to drop the idea. Rocket ground his teeth and explained bluntly, "Thanos attacked us, destroyed our ship and our driver, and took Gamora. I only just managed to fix the Four's driver." Gao Li realized their ship had been broken, so communications had failed. Presumably the Guardians had been marooned on a remote world. Once Rocket fixed the driver, they warped out. Quill was incandescent with rage and abandoned Supergiant to throw himself at Thanos first. "Give me back my Gamora!" Thanos waved off Thor's blows with a weary hand. His face was sorrowful and silent, and the look stunned Quill. Why would such a merciless monster show grief? A vague suspicion formed in Quill's mind, but he refused to believe it and attacked without restraint. "Answer me! Where is she, you bastard?" Rocket forced himself calm. "Drax, Groot, Mantis, go help that big dark cat with this one. I'll keep an eye on Quill. He's losing it." Drax, Groot, and Mantis nodded. Drax and Groot were brute force, and Supergiant's weakness was brute strength. Both Drax and Groot, being simple-minded, had high mental resistance, and Mantis's empathic skills could counter Supergiant's mind powers. Rocket then rushed to Gao Li's side. Thanos paused from his fight with Quill. Gamora had been dear to him, and mentioning her stirred old, painful memories. "Quill," Rocket flew to his friend. The battlefield was a vast, dust-choked desert. Every grain seemed to tremble as the storm approached. Quill, thrown back, struggled up, eyes fixed on Thanos. "Tell me, where is Gamora?" "Gamora made a noble sacrifice. She is at peace," Thanos said after a beat. His voice was calm but grave. "No, no, no, no! You're lying!" Quill roared. Thanos stood on a dune, his gaze cold yet solemn. "Gamora was my most important daughter, the most beloved member of my family. The soul stone that appeared through her sacrifice proves it. I would not joke about her." Rocket's eyes reddened. "You forced her, you monster. Enough talk. Let's fight." Thanos shook his head and gathered energy in his hand, ready to rend the world. "Rocket, Quill, control yourselves. What we can do is kill Thanos and avenge the dead." Gao Li spoke slowly, his eyes closed beneath his faceplate as his mind ran vast, precise calculations. In his head, the future was a web of assembly lines, every possibility computed and predicted. Right. Steve was first to charge, moving with raw strength and unshakable will. Through the time stone, Thanos could see everything slowed and detailed. Steve's muscles like carved marble, each motion pure determination. Natasha and Tony attacked differently. Tony's armor and Natasha's tech shifted into a storm of metallic locusts that swarmed through the air, ready to shred Thanos. Clint was a berserker, his Gatling armor spitting furious fire as he danced across the sand, switching between overwhelming force and lithe precision. Bucky's power matched Steve's. Tony's nanotech traced brilliant arcs through the sky with engineer's exactitude. Hulk roared like an ancient beast. Rocket refused to be outclassed, pulling an arsenal from his pockets. Thor and Gao Li were the center of the assault. Blue lightning and a yellow-green glow braided through the battlefield. Even so, the most frantic among them, Quill, actually dealt the least damage. Thanos watched it all with a hard expression and used the full force of the Infinity Gauntlet. Time bowed to him. He could compress actions and perform multiple moves in what to others would be a split second. He bent reality, warping incoming metallic swarms and energy into twisted, harmless shapes. He launched a covert soul attack like an invisible blade to try to pry open a flaw in Gowli, Thor, or the others. A purple wave from the Power Stone ripped through the sky, enough to blast rock to dust. Thanos absorbed attacks and threw their energy back. The battle shook with counterblasts. Dust and gunfire painted the horizon orange and violet. Against this combined onslaught, even Thanos, with his unmatched physique, felt pressure. How could this be? He'd mastered 4 Infinity Stones, yet their teamwork made them stronger than his solo might. His momentum faltered. Impossible. He couldn't let himself lose. As that doubt grew, Thanos glanced across the field. The Black Order, save for Supergiant and himself, had been smashed, on the verge of collapse. The sight hit him like a mental blow. Could he actually lose? Chapter 237. The sun still rises when masters contend. Often a single decisive move decides the fight. Gowli sees Thanos' momentary lapse. Now! Everyone who had fought with Gowli for years instinctively understood. The victory team and Rocket moved without hesitation. Quill and Thor, who lacked that shorthand, didn't matter. Quill was expendable by design, and Thor was bait, a deliberate draw for Thanos. Thanos was a half-beat slow to react. He took Thor's blow and tried to use the Reality Stone to shift his position and avoid a follow-up. Everything had been accounted for in Gowli's future calculations. In an instant, with a flash of blue light, the bulk of the fighters teleported to Thanos' side. "What?" Thanos cried. Whose spatial power was this? How could they be here so fast? Before him, Gowli's form blurred. He no longer stood as Kamen Rider 02. He had transformed into Kamen Rider Zone. Future calculation complete. Quantum leap achieved, is his calm voice announced at the battlefield's edge. Only Gowli and Iz could fully understand what had happened. Kamen Rider 02's powers relied on future calculations and quantum leaps. Besides Gowli, Iz, the secretary created by Gowli, had always been the other candidate. Gowli had overlaid 2 possibilities at once, one in which he transformed into Kamen Rider Zone, and one in which Iz transformed into Kamen Rider 02. By having Iz from the alternate possibility perform a quantum leap toward Gowli's position, they achieved a miraculous joint performance. 2 Kamen Riders in perfect sync. Quill instinctively fired an electromagnetic device that latched onto the Infinity Gauntlet. As Thanos reached to pull it off, Tony unleashed a laser barrage that slammed him into the sand. Thor struck with all his lightning, leaving the fallen Titan shuddering and unable to move. Hulk, smash! Hulk lunged with every ounce of fury and landed a thunderous blow to Thanos' jaw, sending him into the air. Brilliant blue spatial energy sealed him mid-flight. Zone, maximum drive. Gowli activated his finishing move, and the other riders surged forward behind him. Double rider kick. Double rider kick. Metal rising impact. Rampage Gatling blast fever. Rider super galaxy finish. 5 terrifying ultimate attacks converged on Thanos and detonated in midair. He'd already been weakened by the earlier assault. Now broken bones and crushed organs left him pouring blood from all 7 orifices. For a breath, the battlefield fell silent under the smoke and the spray of gore. Then a figure burst out of the explosion, drenched in Thanos' blood like a crimson demon king. It was Gowli. He had pushed the zone memory to maximum drive. He hadn't waited for the driver to cool. The zone memory's specialty wasn't raw attack power. Its finishing move alone would normally be of modest strength. But combined with the timed strikes, the quantum leap, and the coordinated ultimate techniques of his allies, the blow had become catastrophic. Gowli staggered, driver hot and his breath ragged. The victory had come at a price. The desert tasted of blood and dust, and the sun still rose over a battlefield forever changed. Section 22. Section 222. Uncle Gowli canceled his transformation, fell in with the others, launched himself into the air, and flipped and drove a kick straight into Thanos' chest. Golden double rider kick! Even without his armor, Uncle Gowli was still an incredibly powerful Kamen Rider. The force hit Thanos full on, sending the mad Titan crashing to the ground like a meteorite and kicking up a cloud of dust that climbed toward the sky. Uncle Gowli landed with a backflip. As the smoke thinned, a deformed golden gauntlet rolled free, its infinity stones flashing fitfully. At the center of the cleared circle, Thanos was barely recognizable, His chest had been crushed inward, his breathing stopped. The long series of battles had worn down his defenses. The universe's tyrant had finally reached his end. Phew, it's finally over. Uncle Gowley reached down, picked up the gauntlet, and let out a long breath. Looking up, he saw the Black Order in full retreat across the battlefield, chased and mopped up by the remaining Earth Allied forces. Earth had won a great victory. The Allied forces cheered, and the desert became a sea of jubilation. Everywhere, soldiers and civilians alike celebrated, but among them, the Guardians of the Galaxy were despondent. Quill was practically sobbing, and Rocket silently moved to console him. Drax, Groot, and Mantis gathered as well, sharing the sorrow. Uncle Gowley watched for a moment, then let his gaze wander away. He hadn't known Gamora well, so he wasn't as grief-stricken, but he was genuinely glad Rocket had found a family in the universe. Uncle Gowley, we can't let our guard down yet, right? Won't that Black Order fleet we sent away with the time reversal come back soon? Tony called out, worry in his voice as he shot down the last of the vanguard. Uncle Gowley spread his hands nonchalantly. Now that all 6 Infinity Stones are in my hands and the enemy has no way to contest them, do we still need to worry about a mere Black Order fleet? Putting aside the rest, between Uncle Gowley's large-scale space immobilization and Strange's time suspension, the Black Order fleet would be helpless, nothing but targets. Tony nodded, then stood beside Uncle Gowley, casually watching the victory team finish off Supergiant. Once defeat was certain, Supergiant barely resisted, accepting her end amid the gunfire with a strange, satisfied expression. With the ground war over, Uncle Gowley issued orders for rest and cleanup, the remaining time dedicated to awaiting the Black Order fleet. As he'd predicted, the supposedly formidable armada had no way to break the time-space blockade set by Uncle Gowley and Strange. Before long, the world learned the same shocking news through screens, radios, and every channel available. The alien threat had been neutralized. The enemy was defeated. From bustling cities to quiet villages, from government high-rises to ordinary streets, the entire planet erupted in celebration. Fireworks filled the sky like colorful ribbons, carrying joy to every corner. From ancient Eastern nations to modern Western cities, governments and civilians alike shared in the relief. Since the Battle of New York, even though Uncle Gowley had reversed time, the threat had left fear and despair in its wake. Now, hearing that one of the universe's greatest menaces had been defeated by Earth, people felt an unprecedented release. Governments issued statements thanking frontline soldiers and behind-the-scenes researchers. They praised global unity under TPC's coordination, highlighted humanity's strength and wisdom, and credited technological progress for the decisive turn. At the United Nations, representatives thanked the world for its courage and determination, praising international cooperation. TPC, already enormously influential, rose to an even higher status after this victory. On the streets, spontaneous celebrations broke out. Citizens filled squares, homes, and bars, waving flags, singing, dancing, and clinking glasses. Children played as if the threat had never existed. Social media filled with images of fireworks and smiling faces. News outlets broadcast the joy, their anchors full of excitement and pride, talking about human potential and the triumph over fear and the unknown. Of course, some kept a sober eye on the future. Victory was, they knew, the start of a new chapter, and not the end of danger. Still, for the moment, the world breathed easy. The celebrations lasted through the day until dawn spread over the land. Tomorrow would be a new day. Uncle Gowley and his circle held a banquet to celebrate and reward everyone for their efforts. Watching his friends clink glasses, Uncle Gowley felt quietly satisfied. "What are you thinking about, Uncle Gowley?" Tony sidled up with a glass of champagne. Uncle Gowley smiled and clinked the glass with him. "I was thinking about when we first met. That was when I started getting involved with all of you. Who would have thought back then it would turn into this?" Tony laughed and downed his champagne. "That just proves what a pro I am at crashing into lives at the right moment. One smack, and I found a super genius just like me. You could say my historically famous drunk driving was the start of everything." Uncle Gowley stared. "Really?" Bragging about drunk driving, he kept his glare to himself and let a reminiscent smile appear. "Speaking of which, wasn't there a terrorist attack that day? The 10 rings I confiscated, because I disappeared after that big fight with the Ancient One, they eventually ended up in your hands, right? Tony nodded. Yeah, I've been tinkering with the 10 rings over the years. The material isn't from Earth. The energy signatures are unique, probably alien like the Infinity Stones. Why didn't you dig deeper? That seems unlike you, Tony. Uncle Gao Li asked. Tony chuckled. Logically, I would have, but you kept getting stronger, and your projects kept getting more high-end. Compared to those, the 10 rings just didn't feel worth the time. They were impressive early on, but against our current tech, they're outclassed. Now they're more a curiosity, a trophy. Uncle Gao Li agreed. At their level, fully researching the 10 rings wouldn't add much to their tech reserves. It could be something to pick at in his spare time. After the banquet, Uncle Gao Li checked the time. It had been a year. Time to go back to the DC universe. Chapter 238, God Realm, Heaven Realm. Returning to the DC universe always felt like reuniting after a long absence. Visiting Gotham had become Uncle Gao Li's fixed routine each time he came back from the Marvel universe. From a soul-time perspective, it truly had been a year. Now, instead of taking planes, he used a yellow lantern teleportation to get anywhere, much faster. When he arrived at Wayne Manor, the first thing he noticed was Little Light. The little creature, afternoon tea with Dick, pricked up both of his furry ears. Daddy's back! Uncle Gao Li is here? Dick blinked in surprise, and Little Light ran to greet him. Uncle Gao Li gave him the long-awaited enthusiastic petting. Little Light's fur was luxuriously soft, worthy of a second-generation Holy Son. Alfred and Dick came forward to greet him as well, but Bruce was absent. Alfred, where's Bruce? Uncle Gao Li asked. It's daytime. Does he have work? Alfred replied, Master Bruce is indeed busy. Thanks to the help you've provided, his workload in Gotham has decreased, but with the Justice League, he's actually busier now. Alfred's tone held a hint of reproach, clearly referring to Bruce's increased commitments since the League formed. Uncle Gao Li felt a little embarrassed. He had thought the League couldn't do without Batman, the team's strategist, but he hadn't considered how much busier it would make Bruce. Before Uncle Gao Li could exchange more, a message from Bruce arrived. You want me to come to the Hall of Justice to discuss something? Uncle Gao Li frowned. He wasn't even a member of the League. Why would they call him in? Still, he put Little Light back in Alfred's care and prepared to go. Alfred looked disappointed. You're leaving already? Master Bruce and Master Gao Li, why are the Waynes all so neglectful of home? Uncle Gao Li tried to console him. It's fine. There are 2 little Waynes here. Alfred, train them to be the next generation who care about home. He grinned. Oh, and I should mention, Bruce called me out too, so it's not only me keeping him away from home. Alfred's eyebrows twitched. Uncle Gao Li knew Bruce wouldn't be getting any treats from Alfred for a while. Inside the Hall of Justice, Bruce sneezed. Are you okay? Need some cold medicine? Barry zipped around like a child on sugar. I'll be super fast. I'll bring it right back. Bruce waved him off. No, it's fine. Also, remember to use code names when we're operating, not real names. I've said it before. Oh, sorry. Barry clapped a hand over his mouth. I forgot. I'll pay attention. They'd all agreed to that rule. Some members, like Clark and Bruce, wanted to keep their identities protected to shield loved ones. Even Diana, who didn't mind revealing herself, used a code name in public. A yellow light tore open the air, forming a small portal, and Uncle Gao Li stepped through. What's up, Bruce? Did you need me for something? He asked. Barry hissed. Code names. Remember, use code names. Then, more quietly, what's Mr. Wayne's code name? Uncle Gao Li perked up and teased, Are you going to start quizzing me too? He was pulled back by Bruce before he could launch into more antics. All right, Bruce said bluntly, we called you here by consensus. We want to discuss the most serious crisis, the threat of Darkseid. Uncle Gao Li scanned the room and realized the entire Justice League was assembled. Bruce and Barry, Clark, Diana, Victor, and Arthur. This is formal? He blinked. Have you already come up with a plan? We've talked about this before. Why call me in now? They exchanged looks, and Diana answered, We have a plan, and we want to know if it's feasible. Section 223, Gao Li asked with curiosity, What new plan? Diana answered, Didn't Apocalypse invade Earth before? Darkseid was forced to retreat then because the gods of Earth joined together to drive him off. So our strongest natural allies are right here. Gao Li mused. I suggested asking my father for help, or even asking the other Earth pantheons in Takamanohara to assist us against Darkseid. Exactly, Diana said. The new gods mostly live on New Genesis and Apocalypse, while the old gods gather in Takamanohara. Any deity from Earth's mythologies is essentially an old god. Gowli considered that. That makes sense. But why don't you approach them yourselves? I don't know any gods of Takamanohara. Diana, you and Zeus are connected, and Arthur, aren't you tied to Poseidon? He pointed at Arthur. Your identities would make speaking with them easier than mine, right? Arthur flushed. Honestly, I'm not that familiar with Poseidon. Before all this, I was born and raised in the US. I never really worshipped Poseidon. Clark cut in. Actually, besides wanting to get Mr. Wayne's opinion, the main reason we pulled together for this plan was to contact the magic side heroes. In the past, the leader on the magic side was Dr. Fate, right? Wonder Woman is half a magic side hero, so she knows something about it. God King Nabu, who stands behind Dr. Fate, is the highest authority. After consulting Dr. Fate, we heard another thing. God King Nabu said it would be even better if the Endless Lord led us to Takamanohara. Clark glanced at Gao Li, intentionally or not. Bruce and Clark already knew Gao Li was the Endless Lord. Gao Li hadn't bothered to hide it, yet even they had been surprised by Nabu's reaction. Nabu had implied the Endless Lord's influence eclipsed his own. Gao Li pouted. He wasn't wrong. For the gods of Takamanohara, the Lord of Magic matters more than any single god king of an order pantheon. But I suspect Nabu doesn't want to go in person, Gao Li continued. Even a dignified god king would be shown courtesy by the great pantheons. Nabu is revered in Earth's magic circles, but Takamanohara is where gods from across the universe convene. His sway there would be limited. He's long been flattered by earthly mages and is arrogant. He doesn't want to risk losing face in Takamanohara, so he passed the task to the Endless Lord. Saying he's less influential is a graceful way to avoid going in himself. Besides, Nabu has seen me fight. He watched Gabriel get obliterated and devoured by me, and he himself was defeated in a clash. Those are facts. Victor, who had arrived last and understood the least, asked, So who is the Endless Lord, exactly? God King Nabu said we could ask Mr. Wayne and Superman because they were the first people Nabu saw using night magic, someone explained. So they should know the Endless Lord. But Superman just refused to answer earlier, saying he'd decide after hearing Mr. Wayne, Victor said. And does Superman really use magic? I've never heard of him using magic in any reports. Clark hesitated. I don't use magic, at least not normally. I have used night magic once, but it was a one-off. Gao Li clapped his hands and cut it off. All right, let's get to the point. I won't pretend anymore. Yes, the Endless Lord is me. The reveal didn't produce the dramatic reaction Gao Li had half expected. Clark and Bruce already knew. Diana, who had by Gao Li's endless form in their first encounter, had suspected it. Barry, Arthur, and Victor had been largely cut off from the magic world's news, so the name didn't shock them as much. Gao Li never wanted to flaunt his identity anyway, so the calm was fine. Mr. Wayne is the supreme being Nabu mentioned, Barry said cheerfully. That makes things easier. Please take us straight to Takamanohara for reinforcements. Gao Li asked, Now that you're all here, are you ready to leave? After a few evolutions in power and knowledge, Gao Li no longer needed elaborate rituals to reach Takamanohara. He could pinpoint its coordinates and cross over. Bruce nodded. We don't know when Darkseid will strike. The sooner we finalize countermeasures, the better. Worry creased Bruce's face again. If we leave, Apocalypse could attack Earth the moment we're gone. Should we leave defenses behind? Gao Li laughed and slapped Bruce on the shoulder. Trust God King Nabu, even if he's avoiding stepping forward. He may not normally intervene in every crisis, but an Apocalypse invasion is a major event for the magic world. He continued, Darkseid may look like an alien to you, but as a new god, he's a god-king level being. That puts him squarely in Nabu's domain. Nabu may not want to be front and center, but he won't do nothing. Apocalypse is one of the 8 great divine domains, and the magic side knows about them. Don't be fooled by the lips in Apocalypse. Its scale transcends normal physical laws. If Earth were thrown into it, Earth would be a grain of sand compared to that world. I don't expect Nabu to take Darkseid head-on and win, but he can buy us time to return from Takamanohara, unless Darkseid could instantly destroy a fully powered God King, which is almost impossible. Nabu has kept the material world safe for years with the Order Pantheon. Bruce waited for a moment, then chose to trust Gao Li. Gao Li nodded, shifted into Kamen Rider Wizard Limitless Golden Oryu style, closed his eyes, and traced Takamanohara's location. Takamanohara is the gathering place of deities from civilizations across the universe. It's vast but distinct, so Gao Li had no trouble locking onto it. All right, let's go. With a wave of his hand, a multicolored Bifrost-like bridge slanted through the window, enveloping everyone and carrying them upward through space. Chapter 239, you can even force your way into the gods. Takamanohara. Time in Takamanohara felt solidified, hushed into an eternal calm. A soft breeze stirred the drifting clouds. In that peaceful, mysterious, divine realm, the great pantheons shone like stars, each maintaining balance through their powers. Yet beneath the calm, an unusual sensation spread among the gods, as if a supreme power were about to arrive. This aura, it must be the Endless Lord, Athena said, narrowing her eyes as she peered through the swirling mists. What is he doing here? Apollo's voice held confusion. His lyre's music quivered on the wind. In the past, Apollo had been curious about the unknown. Now a knot of worry appeared on his brow. Zeus spoke slowly, his voice heavy and majestic. As the strongest god king in Takamanohara, he understood the universe's mysteries and knew Apocalypse was one of the 8 great divine domains. Darkseid, Zeus said, that's a big problem. Hera's voice carried unease as well. She, too, held the rank of god king and understood Darkseid's threat. The gods began to talk among themselves, faces clouded. The Endless Lord's power was so vast that his intentions were unknowable. Whatever his reasons, a Lord of Magic's actions could ripple through Takamanohara and the whole cosmos. No magic debt binds us to the Endless Lord, Zeus added finally. We need not fear him. But it's best to avoid conflict, another voice advised. We shouldn't reveal our stance too soon. The Greek pantheon met Gao Li's arrival not with joy, but with apprehension, or resistance, especially at the thought that his purpose might relate to Apocalypse and Darkseid. Those memories were old wounds they didn't want reopened. They did not want Takamanohara plunged into chaos again. In Asgard, the Norse gods speculated quietly. What could the Endless Lord want here? Loki whispered, eyes keen. Perhaps he passes through and means no harm. Tyr clung to hope, but couldn't be certain. Odin stared into the distance, worry in his deep gaze. The wisdom from the World Tree warns this may be tied to Apocalypse and Darkseid. This conjecture weighed heavily. Darkseid was a terrifying force. If Gao Li had come because of him, it could mean unprecedented conflict. We cannot act rashly, Loki urged. Hostility invites disaster. Thor grunted. Why fear Darkseid? Didn't we defeat Apocalypse once? That was when Apocalypse was at its weakest, Odin said quietly. Now Darkseid is no longer what he was. Across Takamanohara in the Japanese pantheon, the gods had gathered in a silent temple, faces tight with worry. They, too, had sensed the Endless Lord. This supreme being, the second Lord of Magic, was an irresistible powerhouse. His arrival brought a fate none of them welcomed. The Endless Lord is likely here because of Apocalypse and Darkseid, Amaterasu said softly. We all know Darkseid is about to move. That's the consensus here. Is he asking us to deal with Darkseid? Tsukuyomi asked with a bitter smile. How can we possibly contend with him now? With Apocalypse on his side, we don't even have standing to negotiate. The room grew heavy. Tsukuyomi's words weren't cowardice, but grim reality. The gulf between them and Apocalypse was immense. We cannot just stand by, Susanoo roared. The Endless Lord will drag us into the abyss. What can we do? One god asked. Darkseid is beyond our power. Is the Endless Lord easy to provoke? Close the gates. Amaterasu decided. We will not bow, but we won't act rashly. Observe and wait. The gods fell into uneasy silence, torn between resisting the Endless Lord's intrusion and recognizing that making enemies of such a being would be disastrous. Many felt anger as well. Gods are proud and accustomed to being above all others. Being collectively shut off from Takamanohara by a newcomer stung. Still, reason tempered that anger. Confrontation with the Endless Lord would be unwise. So in Takamanohara, caution and unease reigned. Meanwhile, Gao Li led the heroes through the clouds, looking down on the mysterious and beautiful land. Golden light shimmered in his eyes, as if he could see through appearances and grasp the essence beneath. "Is this Takama Nohara?" Gaoli murmured, voice threaded with curiosity and a hint of doubt. "Buzz." Gaoli reached out calmly, letting an invisible force spread through the air as he probed the magical currents that filled Tianjing. As masters of Tianjing, the old gods subtly altered the environment whenever the collective will of the deities reached a certain point. From that ripple of change, Gaoli immediately sensed the gods' tension and apprehension. Oh, could it be they don't welcome our arrival? He raised an eyebrow, but kept his thoughts to himself. He had no intention of leaving. "Mr. Wayne, what should we do next?" Barry asked nervously. It was his first time drawing so close to myth. Gaoli didn't answer with words. He only gestured toward Diana. The moment Diana stepped into Tianjing, she began to reach out with her own divine sense and then shouted toward Olympus. "Father, Father God, it's Diana! Let me see you!" She shouted herself hoarse, but nothing answered. Gaoli felt absurd, like he was watching a divine version of someone shouting at a locked door. "Open up. I know you're home. Do you have the nerve to steal a man, but not the nerve to open the door?" "All right, stop shouting, Dia." Wonder Woman." Gaoli finally cut her off. "No amount of yelling will work. From my reading of the magic, the various pantheons have closed their laws. They intend to shut us out." "How can that be?" Diana protested, refusing to believe it. "Forget the others for a moment. I'm Zeus's daughter, and there are followers of the Greek pantheon here. Why would they refuse to see us?" Gaoli shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe they guessed our purpose and are hiding like cowards because they fear Darkseid and Apocalypse?" "That's impossible," Diana shouted. "My father is the first god king of Tianjing. Darkseid is only a conquered subordinate. How could he scare my father?" In Diana's eyes, Zeus was still the mighty father figure, but Zeus himself felt otherwise. He listened to Gaoli's movements and cursed inwardly. Stop shouting, you foolish girl. If you keep this up and the Endless Lord decides to strike, how will this end?" Bruce coughed, interrupting. "Wonder Woman, we don't have time for arguments here. We need a plan." "What plan?" Diana looked bewildered. She had never expected her father or the Greek pantheon to behave like ostriches. The rest of the League felt similarly lost. No one here had ever been to Tianjing. It was an unfamiliar realm. "Oh right, Aquaman isn't." Arthur waved a hand quickly when every pair of eyes looked at him. "Don't look at me. My ties to Poseidon are much weaker than Diana's to Zeus. If Diana can't summon the Greek pantheon, I certainly can't." Gaoli turned to Clark. "Tianjing is a residence for pantheons from across the universe. Theoretically, there should be gods for your people, too. You think we should try to find them, Superman? As the last Kryptonian, maybe Kryptonian gods would give you some respect." "Huh? Me?" Clark pointed at himself, flustered. Kryptonian gods? He'd never heard of them. He knew of gods in abstract, but not of a Kryptonian pantheon. If Kryptonians had gods, would they look kindly on someone who had once stopped their regeneration programs? Probably not. If it were Zod, maybe, but after stopping Zod's plan, the Kryptonian gods might hate me. Gaoli nodded. That assessment made sense. From a divine perspective, Clark could indeed seem like a traitor to Krypton. The Kryptonian gods would likely be hostile, not helpful. By the same logic, the Kryptonian gods would probably have a poor view of Earth as well. Are we helpless then? Victor's cybernetic eye widened. Did we come to Tianjing for nothing? Are the gods really that afraid of Darkseid? Gaoli spread his hands. Not completely. I could pick a pantheon and force my way in to meet them. You can do that? Barry sounded stunned. A whole pantheon of gods. If they refuse to see us, can Mr. Wayne actually force them? Gaoli smiled and answered simply, yes. That concise, confident answer struck them harder than any boast about being the Endless Lord. None of them fully knew Gaoli's power, but compared to the mythological figures they'd grown up with, they realized how formidable he could be. Gaoli wasn't being arrogant. He believed he could do it. The old gods of Tianjing had siphoned off far more magic than any other beings during Hecate's ambush, and magic users were Gaoli's natural counter. His presence suppressed other magic. The more magic a deity fed on, the more Gaoli could restrain them. On top of that, he had absorbed Gabriel's power, the power of creation, and the Yellow Lantern energy, making him stronger than even after devouring Gabriel. Breaking the defenses of one pantheon by force would be an easy task. It would be no struggle to cut through and slay gods or Buddhas if he wanted. Maybe we shouldn't, Mr. Wayne? Violence without cause is wrong. We came to seek help, not make more enemies. Clark was the first to object, and Diana agreed. He's right. If you do that, you'll become enemies with the pantheons. Then we won't only face apocalypse, we'll have the old gods against us as well. Earth's situation will get even worse. Most of the League shared that instinct. They were champions of justice and order. If the gods of Tianjing hadn't attacked them, they wouldn't begin a war. Gao Li understood their concerns. Many of the old gods were the mythic figures humanity had known since childhood, and attacking them would not be something the Justice League could accept lightly. Gao Li himself wasn't absolutely certain of what he could achieve by force. He might be able to conquer a pantheon, but could he sweep across all of Tianjing without making new enemies? The old gods had unknown methods and backup plans. He had never tried using his full power to storm Tianjing, so doubts lingered. The old gods who drew the most magic are restrained by me in theory, he thought, but how it would play out for real is uncertain. But the old gods didn't know Gao Li's caution. From their eavesdropping and surveillance, they heard only one thing. The Endless Lord was considering force. Panic rippled through the pantheons. If the Endless Lord could crush them single-handedly, what face would a pantheon have afterward? Bad! 2 members of the Endless Lord's group are linked to the Greek pantheon. He might spare the Greeks and attack us, was the thought of pantheons outside Greece. Oh no, 2 of the Endless Lord's party are connected to the Greeks. They called us and got no answer. He might make Greece his first target, was the fear inside the Greek pantheon. Gao Li's presence hung over every pantheon like a sword of Damocles. Zeus immediately ordered contact with the other god kings. As the most eminent god king in Tianjing, he could call in favors, and the masters of the Egyptian, Norse, Mayan pantheons, and even many alien pantheons responded with telegrams and projections to the Pantheon Hall. Clearly, our strategy of avoidance hasn't worked. If anything, it's made the Endless Lord consider force, Zeus said, stoking apprehension. God kings were proud. The idea of being judged and possibly struck down stung, but none of them wanted to be the first to challenge the Endless Lord. They waited for Zeus to explain. We all know destruction is the destiny the source bestowed upon the God King of Apocalypse, Zeus said. Darkseid is fated this time. We cannot be dragged into a bottomless vortex. In short, we must show our stance. We love peace. We won't condone a war that would destroy the residents of the divine realm. My plan is best. I need your support. The subtext was clear. Avoid offending Darkseid and the Endless Lord, close ranks, and evict the intruders. Tianjing was the old god's home, and each pantheon held a stake in its laws. The more powerful a pantheon, the more authority it had. Earth's gods held the majority, but combined with other alien pantheons, they could exercise total control. If every pantheon joined, they could forcibly remove the Endless Lord and the Justice League from Tianjing, and then change the realm's laws to lock their entry rights. The idea was to expel them now, then watch to see whether Apocalypse or Earth prevailed before deciding whether to restore access. From the old god's perspective, it was unlikely the Endless Lord would rashly break Tianjing's law, for that would be a slap to every pantheon. Unless he was insane, he wouldn't. Good, the god kings answered one by one. Zeus presided over the ritual array, linking the powers and authorities of the god kings. Not long after, space around Gao Li and the Justice League began to ripple and twist. What's happening? Is someone attacking? The League instinctively drew together, backs to one another, preparing for combat. Gao Li stood calm, eyes closed, taking in the changes. Gao Li, what's the situation? Bruce asked. He caught a trace of a wry smile on Gao Li's face and guessed that Gao Li already understood. Gao Li did not hide it. The laws of Tianjing are being rewritten by the old gods. They're about to expel us. It's very likely we won't be able to re-enter Tianjing for some time. What? Why would they do that? Diana was stunned and then furious. Are they abandoning us? Is Olympus really going to turn away its own? Gao Li spread his hands. They're not abandoning a people. They're protecting their realm and their positions. It's not personal. They're acting out of fear and self-preservation. From the Pantheon Hall, the god kings looked at Zeus with mischief and calculation, but Zeus's expression stayed neutral. "Pity us for the drama," he said lightly. After millennia, Diana's cries held little power. Seeing no response from Olympus, Arthur shot an anxious look at Gao Li. "So what do we do? Let them expel us? Or should we resist? Decide now!" Gao Li was silent for a few seconds. "Why does everyone always look to me to decide?" he thought. He hadn't even formally joined the Justice League or taken command. Still, he answered, "Judging by the scale of the law being activated, this involves at least half the pantheons in Tianjing, perhaps all of them working together. There's nothing you can do to stop it." "You mean their combined influence can do this?" Victor said, shocked. "Do they really have that much power?" Barry grumbled, "Clearly it's not our influence, it's Mr. Wayne's." Gao Li didn't deny it. They're using a collective divine spell to ensure a guaranteed expulsion, which is why they've coordinated so thoroughly. However, he added, because the scale is unprecedented, the activation isn't instantaneous. "You can't act, but I can do something." Bruce's voice dropped, resolute. "Can you protect us and keep us inside Tianjing?" 225. Section 225. Honestly, looking at how the gods are acting, there's no point in forcing ourselves to stay in Tianjing, Gao Li said with a light sigh. "But I can try. Before the combined divine spell is complete, I might be able to make it collapse on the spot by erasing the magic nodes that bind it. If the spell is already finished, though, I'll be powerless. It's not that my power can't affect a completed divine spell. It's that this one is too vast. Even if I can force it to fall apart, the residual effects before it fully breaks would be enough to eject us from Tianjing." Gao Li's meaning was plain. The larger the divine spell, the longer it would take to collapse, and even a partial collapse would release effects before the spell dissolved. So if Gao Li planned to confront the combined might of the divine systems directly, the Justice League had to decide quickly, before the spell completed. Gao Li himself didn't care either way. He'd fight or stand down as needed. It was the Justice League who were worried, so he left the choice to them. The god kings in the Pantheon overheard and were terrified and furious. They cursed the Lord of Magic for his arrogance. How could he even suggest such a thing? This was a super-scale divine spell, the product of every divine system's masters working together. Yet Gao Li claimed he could shatter it with a single move? It was like saying you didn't need to raise a house to the ground. Just remove its load-bearing pillars and the whole thing would collapse. And because the Tianjing old gods had poured an enormous amount of magic into the spell, if Gao Li truly acted, it wouldn't be only the pillars that were erased. Beams and load-bearing walls could vanish as well. That realization both shocked and enraged the god kings. "All right, forget it," one of them muttered. "If the master doesn't want us, guests shouldn't overstay." The Justice League exchanged troubled looks. Finally, Clark spoke. Gao Li nodded, cast a protective weave over them, and allowed the combined divine spell to push them out of Tianjing. As they left, the god kings breathed collective sighs of relief. The divine masters closed their gates and withdrew to their kingdoms. Back on Earth, everyone returned to their original positions, drained and dejected. None of them had expected the trip to Tianjing to end like this. Those famed old gods were so afraid of Darkseid. Didn't that prove how dangerous he had become? "He's the symbol of evil and destruction," Arthur said with a weary sigh. "He was defeated by the old gods once. Why has he grown so strong?" Gao Li looked toward the horizon. As his power and cosmic understanding increased, he saw things differently. "It's not that fate is unfair," he said. "The universe is simply too fair." "What do you mean?" Bruce frowned. "Does the universe have a will of its own?" "If you mean a personified will, then no. But the universe does regulate itself in invisible ways that favor its long-term balance," Gao Li replied softly. "Because the universe isn't a sentient being in the everyday sense, it doesn't prize good or evil, it prizes balance. Apocalypse and New Genesis are the clearest examples. Darkseid and the Highfather are personifications of evil and justice, respectively, granted by the universe. That's why they're called new gods." Bruce thought for a moment. So if Darkseid represents evil, the universe might fluctuate how much it empowers him to maintain balance? That's my hypothesis, Gowley said. Not that Darkseid isn't powerful on his own. Without any blessing from the universe, he's still a fearsome god king. That's his lower limit, an extremely powerful god king. The universe may withdraw to that baseline, but it won't make him weaker than that. Conversely, his upper limit could be essentially unbounded. When the universe decides evil needs to be stronger, it can give Darkseid unimaginable power. I understand, Victor murmured. So the minimum the universe gives Darkseid could be nearly nothing, just Darkseid's own strength. Maybe his ancient defeat was like that. He was newly risen on Apocalypse and hadn't yet received the universe's blessing when he attacked Earth. Now, after ages, his own power has grown, and the universe may be giving him its blessing as well. Darkseid's current baseline was already at the level of a top-tier god king. With the universe's favor added, he could be terrifying beyond comprehension. Diana bristled. You say the universe is fair between good and evil. If it really were fair, it should reduce the power of evil. Earth has suffered crisis after crisis in recent years. Clark added, we've had multiple world-ending incidents lately. You're thinking only of Earth, Gowley said. There are countless civilizations in the universe that have been peaceful for eons, and of those great crises, how many actually destroyed worlds? Most were resolved. From that perspective, justice often wins. The League fell into thoughtful silence, absorbing the implication. Darkseid might indeed now be stronger than ever, which explained why the Tianjing old gods would rather irritate the Lord of Magic than make enemies of Darkseid. From the quiet, Barry cautiously raised his hand. Didn't Mr. Wayne say there's a new Genesis that corresponds to Apocalypse? The Highfather is the counter to Darkseid. Maybe we could seek help from New Genesis. The suggestion lifted the mood. It's worth trying, Clark said, but we don't know where New Genesis is. Probably impossible, someone added. Gowley cut in. A lot of what I know about Apocalypse and New Genesis comes from my travels searching for the Lantern Beast. Apocalypse and New Genesis once had a major war. At the end, because of the balance of good and evil at the time, Darkseid and the Highfather were evenly matched. Too many new gods were lost, and both sides had to sign a truce. Clark's eyes widened. The embodiment of justice compromised with the embodiment of evil. Gowley shrugged. Darkseid and the Highfather became new god kings later. They have wills of their own. They're not mere puppets of the universe. Even without the universe's blessing, Darkseid is still as strong as a god king. Barry despaired. So if they truced when the two sides were evenly matched, what hope is there now that Apocalypse is stronger? Bruce said, it's theoretical, but we can't just do nothing. We should at least try. Try without me, Gowley yawned. I won't join. The League all looked to him. Clark hesitated, then asked, almost awkwardly, Mr. Wayne, odd as it sounds, given what happened with the Holy Sun, have you considered seeking help from heaven? Gowley waved a hand. I'm planning to. While you try everything you can, I can't just slack off. They all knew this task would fall to Gowley, but he didn't have much hope. Historically, heaven only intervened in truly massive events that affected both heaven and hell, otherwise it stayed hands-off. Even when Gabriel descended with demonic kings, heaven did nothing. If Silver City had truly closed its gates, Gowley expected it would at best send a specter, and only with the power God chose to grant. With that in mind, Gowley opened a wormhole to Wayne Manor and pulled Little Light out of the manor's bath. Little Light had been gleefully splashing in the pool-sized bathing room when the air tore open and a hand reached in to pluck him out, an almost comical horror movie image. Papa? Little Light stared at Gowley, still dripping. Then, with a wag of his tail, he shook himself and sprayed water everywhere. Hey, don't shake, Gowley managed, forcing Little Light still, then with a small sweep of magic evaporated the water from his fur. Where are we going to play, Papa? Little Light asked, excited. We're going to your mother's home, Gowley said after a pause. Little Light cocked his head in confusion. Gowley noticed the pup had nothing on and reached to conjure clothes, but then stopped. Little Light, change back into your true form first. Little Light blinked, and obedient though unsure why, shifted into a small wolf in a flash of light. Gowley tucked the fluffy creature into his arms, waved his hand, and activated the Bifrost Bridge to carry them toward heaven. People say only the dead go to heaven or hell. God set that rule. and it's rare to break. Even so, Gowli could at least teleport into the divine realm, though not into Silver City itself. Silver City was the heart of heaven, and as expected, its gates were sealed tight. Two archangels stood watch at the gate. At the sight of Gowli, they moved to intercept. Heaven's doctrine allowed for one god alone. It had angels, not multiple deities. But that didn't make its angels weak. Any archangel could rival a true god. Archangels matched god kings in power. "I have something I'd like to discuss," Gowli began. The archangel on the left cut him off. "We're sorry. Silver City is temporarily closed to mortal affairs. The heaven system continues to operate, governing souls, judgment, but Silver City will not intervene." Gowli's eye twitched. "Closed? But Eden is God's creation. Earth's crisis is part of that." The archangels stiffened. "The calamity of Eden is a trial sent by God. Lord Michael has decreed Silver City must not interfere." Michael, Gowli considered. If Michael was the one directing Silver City, he must be as formidable as Lucifer, if not more so. Michael, as Lord of Silver City, would be a colossal force. Gowli reached into his cloak with a serious expression. The archangels' faces changed instantly. "What are you doing? Stop! Stop now!" Beads of sweat appeared on their brows. No one could predict what monstrous trump card a powerful lord of magic might wield. Gowli drew out little light. For a moment, the archangels were stunned into silence. Then, in unison, they dropped to their knees and bowed low. "Master," they intoned. The two archangels had mistaken Little Light for the little dog god, the humble canine avatar sometimes called God's humility, a rare manifestation of the divine made low in form. The little dog god was elusive and seldom seen. Any hint of his presence inspired worship. Little Light's pure essence had fooled them for an instant, but only a few heartbeats later, both archangels' expressions shifted. This wasn't exactly the master they'd glimpsed before. The avatar species didn't quite match the little dog god's known forms. If it wasn't the master, yet exuded such a pure, divine aura. The archangels remained on their knees, but their worship had turned cautious, their heads lifting with a new, stubborn wariness. Section 226, Gowli said proudly, "This is your holy son. Isn't it only fitting that the Holy Sun returns to Silver City? Open the gates at once." Little Gao, still a little dazed, curled into a furball in Gowli's arms and peered around curiously. "We greet, my Lord Holy Sun," the archangel on the right forced out through gritted teeth. "But we are very sorry. The Lord of Silver City has ordered that the gates are not to be opened until he himself arrives." Gowli's frown deepened. He could feel the currents in Silver City were stronger than he'd expected. The angels, God's own creations, were not uniformly fond of God's Son. Rumor held that Lucifer's fall began with his refusal to bow before Jesus. The archangels could be stubborn, but even so, they would not openly disrespect the Holy Son. Even toward little Gao, who had never been to heaven, the archangels had to kneel to speak, however unwillingly. Refusing entry to the Sun overrode ordinary protocol. It was a clash of statuses between the Holy Sun and the Lord of Silver City. In the end, Michael's decree carried the day. The angels obeyed him, and even the Holy Sun would not be admitted to Silver City. "All right," Gowli said, accepting the decision. He took little Gao and left by the Bifrost Bridge. Back at Wayne Manor, he placed little Gao gently in the oversized bathtub. Then his phone buzzed, multiple messages from the Justice League sent just before. Another emergency already? The League rarely called on him for anything trivial. Curious, Gowli opened a wormhole. The trip would only take a second. At the Hall of Justice, he found Hal Jordan, looking a touch rounder from recent indulgences. "Hal Jordan," Gowli said, "you called for me?" Hal was reserved. He nodded and motioned to the table. "I'm not a Green Lantern anymore, but my ring and lantern core have been kept at my place. When I woke this morning, both were acting strangely." Gowli glanced at them. The ring and lantern core were misfiring. A faint Green Lantern energy flickered from them, with more and longer dark intervals. "I've never seen anything like it," Hal said. Bruce added, "You've studied the ring and core systems more than anyone. We thought you should look." "A fair call," Gowli said. "No one on Earth understands the lantern tech like I do. I've nearly mapped their systems." He picked up the ring and lantern core, fed a little green energy through them, and scanned. His expression changed from casual to alarmed in seconds. He set the items down. "This is..." A distress signal. The Green Lantern Corps headquarters is automatically broadcasting a call for help to every Green Lantern in the universe. The Green Lantern Corps is calling for help? Members of the League exclaimed in unison. They all knew the Corps' reputation, de facto police of the cosmos, vast and powerful. For them to be calling for outside aid was shocking. "We should go to them," Clark said, voice steady. "The Corps is a force for order. If they fall, huge parts of the universe could descend into chaos." "Could it be a diversion?" Victor asked. Arthur glanced at Bruce. "If Batman hasn't said anything, maybe it's not." Bruce's voice was low and blunt. "If whoever can conquer the Green Lantern Corps exists, they wouldn't need a diversion to take care of Earth." They all fell silent. Bruce was right. A single Green Lantern could match many Justice League members, and the Corps numbered in the thousands. The threat implied by this signal was terrifying. "I can pull coordinates to Oa from the Lantern Corps," Gao said. "But are you sure you want to go? If the enemy doesn't need a diversion to deal with Earth, we might not be able to stop them even if we go." Barry fidgeted. "Is this because Mr. Wayne is here? Would they target him?" Gao shook his head. "I have multiple surveillance methods on Earth, and Nabu's Order Divine system offers defense. I can open wormholes across the universe in an instant. A diversion wouldn't make sense for me." Clark clenched his fist. A superhero shouldn't cower at the scale of the threat. Whether it's the Corps or civilians, we can't sit by while a crisis happens. Gao took that in. Even Bruce didn't refute Clark's conviction. "All right, wait a moment. We'll go." "Can I come along?" Hal asked quietly. "I trained there." Gao smiled. "Sure, you can show us the way." Hal didn't want to put the ring back on for psychological reasons, and Gao could open the wormhole anyway. After a brief analysis, Gao snapped his fingers. A vast tunnel of green energy opened. They stepped through and arrived to a scene of ruin. Oa, the Green Lantern Corps' home, devastated. The planet was ravaged. Buildings lay in ruins, the air reeked of death and smoke, and green light flickered among the wreckage like a dying ember. "This is Oa," Gao whispered. "Once it was the Corps' headquarters, now it's a wasteland." They walked through ash and ruin. The battle that had hit Oa had been cataclysmic. Craters, collapsed towers, and the bodies of parademons and fallen Green Lanterns littered the ground, signs that every inch had been bathed in blood. "Who could do this?" Gao asked. Brow nodded. Hal's face crumpled. "There are parademons here. It's probably Darkseid, Apocalypse." Bruce looked up at a sky bruised red by fires. "We need to find survivors. We have to learn when the attack happened and what transpired." Barry's hand tightened. "If it wasn't too long ago, I can reverse time." "Judging by when Hal first detected the distress signal, it's likely too late," Bruce interrupted. "We need survivors to gather intelligence on Apocalypse." The League dispersed, combing through the rubble. The sight of cityscapes reduced to cinders and high-tech facilities smashed beyond recognition filled them with a collective sorrow. Their search paid off. Beneath a heap of debris, they found a young Green Lantern, badly wounded but alive, resolve still bright in his eyes. Clark hauled him free. The lantern wiped grit from his face. "Thank you. Who are you?" "We're the Justice League, from Earth," Clark said. The lantern's eyes widened with recognition. "Earth, Abin Sur," he understood. Abin Sur's association with Earth made the planet known in Corps history. "What happened?" Gao asked. The lantern's voice shook. "It was Darkseid. He came for revenge, for that ancient battle recorded in our archives." Diana's eyes widened. "The Green Lanterns helped in the ancient battle on Earth. Darkseid must have targeted the Corps first for retribution." The lantern nodded, grief in his tone. "It was a planetary-scale battle. We fought against the Dark New Gods. Their power was overwhelming. We couldn't hold." "Where are the Guardians?" Hal asked. "Weren't they on Oa?" The young lantern looked at Hal oddly. "You're Hal Jordan, Abin Sur's ring-bearer. You don't come to Oa often, so you might not know. The Guardians are high in rank. Their mental powers are among the universe's finest. But in raw power, they were no match for Darkseid. He annihilated the Guardians. He is simply too strong." Hal's face went pale. The Justice League felt their hearts sink into an ice cave. They had known dark forces were dangerous, but to wipe out Guardians, beings described as universe-class powerhouses, was almost unimaginable. "Rest assured," Clark said after a long silence, voice solemn, We'll do everything we can to help." They continued their search, finding more survivors and piecing together the scale of the disaster. The rescued lanterns joined in the effort, carrying the wounded and tending those who could be saved. Every fallen figure was a mute elegy, every survivor a spark of hope. Gao Li, unable to stand by, shifted into Blazar Ultraman and tore into the parademons, furious at what had been done to Oa. New Genesis. Deep in his palace, Father sat upon a golden throne. His eyes were wide and deep as the stars, but worry flickered through them now. He held a cup of amber wine and read the dispatch with a furrowed brow. Oa has been attacked by Apocalypse. The Green Lantern Corps is nearly annihilated. Meteron, the god of knowledge, reported in a low, solemn voice. Father's expression grew heavier. He understood the meaning of such an attack. The conflict between New Genesis and Apocalypse had stretched across ages. The Green Lantern Corps had been a vital ally. Their near destruction was not only a tactical loss, but a challenge to the order of the universe. "I know," Father said. "The Essence Society has lost contact with Ganthet. He has likely suffered as well." The Essence Society was the highest form of the universe. Its members included new god leaders like Father, the great old god kings such as Zeus, and figures like Phantom Stranger, the wizard Shazam, and Ganthet, leader of the Guardians. Meteron added, voice heavy, "Many light new gods have petitioned to join the fight. Shall we permit them?" Father considered a moment. "Let them come." "Father, we cannot stand idle." Orion burst in, indignant. Orion, Darkseid's second son, given to Father as a hostage in youth, had the light new god's fierce spirit. After the decisive battles between New Genesis and Apocalypse, a truce had been struck and the children were exchanged as hostages to keep the peace. Now anger blazed in the eyes of every light new god who had gathered. Apocalypse has committed a monstrous act. We must send troops and punish them. Calm. Father raised a hand. His voice was steady and authoritative. We have a truce with Apocalypse. Violating that agreement without clear authorization would be unwise. But the Green Lantern Corps are our allies. Do we simply watch them slaughtered? One deity demanded. Father fell silent, and for a moment a look of pain passed over his face. 227, Section 227. I understand your feelings, but we must honor the contract. War brings only destruction, not peace. The defining difference between the new gods and the old is that the new gods are bound to their divine attributes, above all, to keeping their oaths. For the light new gods, who stand for order and justice, breaking a vow is unthinkable. If we do nothing, the balance of the universe will be broken, another light new god said, voice tight with concern. Apocalypse's ambition is obvious. They will never stop. The father shook his head gently. He knew the light new god spoke the truth, but the current situation did not allow New Genesis to intervene directly. We must preserve the order of the universe, not be led by emotion, he said. What we need now is strategy, not impulse. He stood, tall and stately, against the mural of the star-strewn river behind him. Notify the other worlds, strengthen their defenses, activate our emergency protocols, prepare for war should it come. Just preparations? But, Orion began. I said, wait and see. The father's voice brooked no argument. Orion fell silent. All the gods answered in unison, though their faces showed how worried they were. The father's own eyes flickered with conflict. He understood the anger, the urge to march forth, but he also knew brute force would not settle the root of the problem. Go back, he ordered. The peace of the universe is fragile, like a thread in wind and rain. Remain at your posts. The light new gods withdrew in grim silence, leaving only the father. In the palace of New Genesis, everything fell quiet. He watched the distant stars for a long time. Chapter 243, Yu Shi Huang, Ion Shark Oa. After Gao Li transformed into Blazar Ultraman, he cleared the remaining parademons from Oa and took the chance to examine the ruined headquarters of the Green Lantern Corps. Based on what he found and the threads of Green Lantern energy he could sense, he had uncovered something important. Once the parademons were dealt with, Gao Li returned to the Justice League briefing, where the team was compiling the confirmed intelligence. Darkseid had led Apocalypse's dark new gods in the assault. Though his intentions hadn't been spelled out, everyone suspected ancient vengeance, and a second aim to weaken any potential resistance, to prevent alliances from forming like before. In addition, Bruce said in his deep, measured voice, They'll try to erode any future opposition, so no one can unite against them. Diana frowned. With that in mind, could Darkseid's next target be the Heavenly Realm? That's possible, Clark said. We should support the Heavenly Realm, now. Arthur's tone was scornful. I don't think those exalted my lords want our help. They'd rather avoid us. They just sent us away not long ago, remember? Clark's earnestness flared. Aquaman, I know. Gao Li cut in. Even if we want to help the Heavenly Realm, we can't get in now. Not unless the whole Pantheon reunites to lift the entry restrictions. And Aquaman's right in another way, Gao Li added. Many of the God Kings in the Heavenly Realm are on par with you. One extra warrior makes very little difference. Clark fell silent. The Justice League wasn't his private command, and he respected Gao Li's judgment. When the meeting broke up, Gao Li pulled Hal aside and showed him the photos he'd taken. Hal, do you know where this is? Gao Li asked. Hal studied the images. The outer structure is badly damaged, but if I'm not mistaken, this is the Green Lantern Corps' central power battery. The central power battery? Yes, lantern rings draw their power from personal cores, but those cores must periodically recharge at OA's central power battery. Hal's voice dropped. I didn't expect that place to survive. It was the core's heart. Did Apocalypse spare it? Gao Li shook his head. Quite the opposite. Apocalypse concentrated its attack there. When I took these photos, I noticed a large number of Green Lantern's bodies nearby. The battery is badly damaged, but it wasn't utterly destroyed. The core's defense held it together. Hal was quiet for a long moment, the fact weighing on him. Then he said, If it's so damaged, I don't know whether it's even usable. That's what I thought at first, Gao Li said. But when I got closer, I sensed a pure Green Lantern energy far beyond the level of rings or cores. Far beyond the core? Hal frowned. I used to charge my ring at the battery. It was pure there, yes, but not whatever you're describing. Gao Li smiled. You've seen Parallax, so you know what a lantern beast is. Parallax is the yellow lantern beast, the living embodiment of fear. The pure energy I sensed inside the battery is not just a concentrated pool of lantern energy, it's the lantern beast of green energy. Hal blinked. A lantern beast in the battery? Gao Li hesitated, then told him the rest. In truth, his awareness hadn't come from study alone. It came from two lantern beasts that now dwelled with him. Besides Parallax, a new lantern beast had joined him. One day, when Gao Li was searching the universe for lantern beasts, a sky-blue energy that looked like a soaring phoenix found him and merged of its own accord. It called itself Yu Shi Huang, the blue lantern beast of hope. Ancient, the first to break free from the chaotic universe and enter the physical world, it was the first creature to generate hope. It had sought Gao Li because he was searching for lantern beasts. As the embodiment of hope, it wanted to help. More than that, Yu Shi Huang had sensed Gao Li's nature and recognized that he was the perfect host, something no other being in the universe matched. So it actively became his. Yu Shi Huang's consciousness had been startled too. Gao Li's body actually suppressed Parallax. The seven lantern beasts knew one another from the chaotic universe. Yu Shi Huang had never seen anyone overpower a lantern beast the way Gao Li did. After a brief explanation, Gao Li teleported to the Green Lantern's central power battery. Of the three emotional spectrum energies he currently wielded, only Green Lantern energy came from his research into lantern lore, roughly making him an unofficial Green Lantern and explaining why it felt weakest of the three. Still, as he approached the battery, the green energy grew stronger and more active. He wrapped himself in it and reached out. The moment his hand touched the battery, a presence answered. "Who is it?" a voice cried, and Gao Li's vision filled with a green creature that looked like a cross between a shark and a whale. "My name is Gao Li Wayne," he said. "I presume you are Ion Shark, the Green Lantern's lantern beast." Ion Shark regarded him with surprise. "Gao Li Wayne? Are you the host of Yu Shi Huang?" There was warmth in Ion Shark's tone. Yu Shi Huang had, in a sense, saved Ion Shark. When the lantern beasts first emerged in the physical universe, Ion Shark was badly wounded. Half of it had been torn away by a chaotic predator. Proselyte, the lantern beast of compassion, had risked itself to rescue the others. Proselyte's intervention, and a fragment attached by Yu Shi Huang, had allowed Ion Shark to survive and grow courageous, and become the Green Lantern Beast. Ion Shark's mind trembled again when he sensed Parallax's suppression. You can suppress a lantern beast? Who are you? Parallax was Ion Shark's great enemy. The idea that one being could host multiple major lantern beasts and that one of them could be held down was beyond his understanding. Gao Li let out a breath. I am the Lord of Magic and also a user of the emotional spectrum. You may have stayed in the central battery a long time and not heard of the Endless Lord, Gao Li added, but you must know what happened on Oa. Ion Shark's response was low and bitter. Lantern beasts are not limited to a single emotion. They possess all 7 emotions and the 6 desires, though one dominates each. I know, he said, but I am powerless. In the assault on Oa, Ion Shark could have left the battery to possess an individual lantern, transforming them into an ion lantern. But doing so would have been like trying to douse a blaze with a cup of water. No single ion lantern, however powerful, could stand against Darkseid. More important, if Ion Shark had left, the central power battery would have been left without its internal guardian. It was because Ion Shark stayed, because it defended and stabilized the battery from within while the core fought outside, that the central power battery endured Apocalypse's assault. Most Green Lanterns had poured themselves dry in battle and then recharged at the battery. Without Ion Shark's internal vigilance, the battery would have collapsed. Chapter 244. Please ask the Endless Lord to save us. Section 228. Without the Ion Shark guarding it, the Green Lantern's central power battery would very likely collapse from the sudden surge of energy, making the battle even worse. Gao Li said bluntly, Darkseid, who led the Dark New Gods to invade Oa, has recently set his sights on Earth, the planet I'm on. Ion Shark, I need your help to improve our chances against Darkseid. Will you help me? Will you help Earth avoid what happened to Oa? I will, Ion Shark said gravely. If you can bear another lantern beast, I'll go with you. With the current number of Green Lanterns, I'm no longer necessary to stabilize the central power battery. Gao Li froze. Was it really that simple? He'd been warned about Ion Shark's temperament by Yu Shi Huang. Surely it wouldn't just go along with anyone who asked. Gao Li had prepared many arguments, even some moral pressure, but none of that was needed. Seeing Gao Li's disbelief, Ion Shark continued, I want to stop Darkseid too. Among those who can use the emotional spectrum, you are the strongest I've seen. You restrained and imprisoned Parallax, and Yu Shi Huang acknowledged you. Both of those things tell me you are on the right side. Why would I refuse? All right, then. Thank you for your trust. Gao Li nodded, lowered his defenses, and allowed Ion Shark to merge with him. Instantly, his body glowed a brilliant green, his energy surging to the level of a yellow lantern. Gotcha! Gao Li clenched his fists like a trainer who had just captured a Pokémon, leaving the lantern beasts puzzled. While he simulated the sensation of an alchemist, a far more dire scene unfolded in the Celestial Realm. The Celestial Realm, the immortal sanctuary, homeland of the gods, shone like a jewel in limbo. Greek gods paced carved halls, Norse deities whispered in verdant forests, Egyptian gods strode beneath majestic pyramids, countless other pantheons and alien deities coexisted in that timeless space. That harmony shattered in an instant. Starlight ignited, the sea of chi roiled, and massive warships streaked across the heavens like dark meteors. Apocalypse had come. The invasion carried a darkness unlike any divine presence. Darkseid led it, ruthless, implacable, commanding parademons and dark elites eager to snuff out the light. Gods of the Celestial Realm, your era has ended. Darkseid's gaze was cold, cruel. Slaughter of the old gods had been his path to power before. To him, this campaign was familiar. Zeus, long hailed as the strongest god-king of the Celestial Realm, was the first to sense the tremor of crisis. On a mountaintop temple, his voice rang out, alerting the pantheons. Darkseid has invaded the Celestial Realm. How dare he? This is the old god's stronghold. A father of gods, can you, as you did against the Endless Lord, force Apocalypse out? Athena demanded. No, Zeus answered, helpless. If I could, I would have already summoned the lords of every pantheon. Perhaps because of that Justice League on Earth, the Endless Lord has been restrained and cautious. Darkseid won't hold still long enough for that, Athena said. We don't have time to jointly prepare and activate a fortress spell. In Asgard, Odin closed his one eye. His face grew grim. We've tried to avoid provoking him, yet he won't let go. Does he really think he can push us around? Odin's words, low as they were, unleashed storm and wind across the realm. The same disbelief spread through the other pantheons. Why would Darkseid attack the celestial realm? The gods asked. Is he vengeful enough? Where does he get the confidence to challenge all of us? Under their respective god kings, the pantheons raised divine artifacts and prepared to resist. On his warship, Darkseid looked down at the celestial realm with barely concealed triumph. My lord, those decaying old-timers are surely wondering how Apocalypse dares confront them, Desaad mocked. Apocalypse's force was vast. Members of the Dark New Gods were true gods in their own right. After the universe's tilt toward darkness, Apocalypse had been empowered. Their strength had surged. Let these self-proclaimed immortals learn what true power is, Darkseid rasped. The sky tore open as dark energies layered the heavens. The gods rallied. Zeus unleashed lightning like divine wrath, the sea churned with godly force, the earth trembled, and the combined will of the pantheons began to reshape the celestial realm's environment in resistance. For a moment it seemed the realm might hold. Darkseid only smiled. He remained composed as the gods' fury mounted, his confidence unshaken. Why invade us? A foreign god king thundered. We had nothing to do with your wars on Earth. You were once less than you are now. What gives you this arrogance? Darkseid looked at him with cold amusement. I don't deny my past failures. I learned from them, whereupon my strength was once limited by numbers. Now it is not. The implication hung in the air. What he couldn't do before, he could now. Then the gods struck back en masse. The water gods unleashed wild torrents, seeming to rip through anything. Darkseid merely extended a hand and shattered the waves with his dark power, crushing the gods' majesty in an instant. What? So easily? The gods cried. That was the combined power of many of us. But Apocalypse's onslaught was relentless. Their dark power battered the celestial realm's defenses like a storm. The gods fought fiercely, but despair crept in. The dark new gods drew strength not only from themselves, but from the universe's overall tilt toward evil. Their combined force began to overwhelm the celestial realm. Then Darkseid struck in a way that broke more than defenses. He broke morale. His eyes glowed, and the Omega effect shot out like a venomous shaft, piercing the divine bodies of more than a dozen true gods. The Omega beam killed upon contact. In a smaller pantheon, one blow would have wiped out more than half its members. Darkseid's dark power surged like a flood. With him at the tip, the gods' defenses collapsed. Parademons poured into the realm like a tide, bringing devastation. Gods fell one after another. Divine power that had once been absolute now seemed impotent before Darkseid. You, former foe, how dare you be so arrogant? Zeus roared. Lightning arced, but each strike skittered off Darkseid's armor, doing little. The more Zeus pressed, the paler his face became. As a top-tier god king, he felt with growing dread that Darkseid's personal power, without even accounting for the cosmic blessing on Apocalypse, already exceeded any god king in the celestial realm. A being like this should not exist. Odin, second only to Zeus, found himself equally strained. Even his spear Gungnir could only do so much against the combined pressure. Lesser god kings and main gods fared worse. Divine artifacts and power could repel parademon attacks, but they counted for nothing against the dark new gods. A single brush with Darkseid's abyssal might could crush a deity outright. The battle raged across the celestial realm, every field soaked with blood and despair. The gods resisted with everything they had, but against Darkseid's absolute force, their resistance felt like futile final gasps. One by one, omnipotent deities fell. Zeus watched them go and felt helpless rage. This is impossible. We are gods. The celestial realm is ours. Desperation turned to a frantic plan. What are you waiting for? Send for the Endless Lord. Wasn't he supposed to handle Darkseid? Hera screamed. Blood splattered across her robe. Zeus recoiled. You are a god king too. Can't you see? The restrictions we placed on the Endless Lord and the Justice League still hold. We can't lift them now. Hera's words were truth spoken in madness. The decrees and prohibitions that had controlled the Endless Lord required the consent of the godly system lords to reverse. Consent they no longer had the power to command. Even if Gao Li could tear through the celestial realm by erasing magic, it would take time to dismantle such an enormous divine spell. And who could notify the Endless Lord in the first place? How could the gods be given that chance when Darkseid had anticipated their resistance and struck with relentless precision? Temples collapsed, starlight dimmed, and the realm's protections weakened. As the battle dragged on, the gods' will frayed and resignation set in. Darkness swept like a tide, and hope dwindled to nothing. Chapter 245, Anti-Life Equation. Each of the gods watched their siblings in the pantheon suffer under Darkseid's iron fist. Some died outright, and the carefully cultivated image of being above all others shattered in an instant. No matter how they struggled, the fate of the celestial realm had already been sealed. Under Darkseid's overwhelming absolute force, the gods fell one after another like cut straw. Their divine blood stained the land red, and their power dissipated into the air. The celestial realm, once vibrant and sacred, had become a purgatory of fire and blood. Zeus watched god after god fall and felt only pain, helplessness, and shame. He had been ruler of the skies and lightning, the first god-king of the celestial realm, but now he could not even protect his own domain. "Ragnarok has come earlier than foretold," he murmured. Odin closed his eyes, despair in his heart. He had sworn to defend Asgard to the last breath, and now he watched it collapse. Amaterasu stood amid the temple ruins, her eyes stripped of their divine light and full only of sorrow. The Japanese pantheon suffered especially, perhaps because of insufficient strength. More than 90% of its gods had been slaughtered by Dark's new gods. Hope ebbed away, and the celestial realm fell into ceaseless devastation. When the ancient old gods finally awoke and confronted reality, it was already too late. Darkseid's power had swept everything before it. In time, the celestial realm fell under his rule. Darkseid moved through pantheons, accomplishing things no one could read. When he returned, his aura had grown even more terrifying, striking deep fear into every dark new god. To them, his power spread like a black hole. A deep, cold fluctuation pressed on them in a way none had felt before. The battlefield, already soaked in blood, grew even more oppressive beneath his presence. Even the dark new gods who had been victorious trembled before him, reverence igniting like oil on a blaze. At Darkseid's return, everyone held their breath, unwilling to move. The black mist around him had thickened until it seemed that even light could not pierce his power. "That's enough. Let's go," Darkseid said slowly. Desaad blinked in surprise. "My lord, we've only just taken the celestial realm. Are we abandoning it already?" Darkseid's voice was indifferent. "What I wanted has been obtained. With the objective achieved, the celestial realm is worthless." Desaad lowered his head. "I understand. Your will be done." Many of the dark new gods could not grasp the decision to discard the god's realm like refuse. But Darkseid was not mistaken. The most valuable thing in the celestial realm had indeed been secured. That was the true reason Darkseid first turned his attention to Earth centuries ago. Earth had once seemed remote and insignificant to him, until he learned of the life equation from the green Martian civilization, the people of Martian Manhunter. The Martians had formulated a mathematical model for life itself, a way to express life's meaning as a precise equation. Darkseid, ever cunning as well as powerful, studied that idea and asked himself if there could be a counterpart, an anti-life equation. Through calculation and observation, he concluded the anti-life equation must exist, and it would be a perfect tool for him. The anti-life equation could be thought of abstractly as an entity, the dark counterpart to Origin, or more concretely as a mathematical model, an incantation inscribed in the world. Unlike the laws that govern matter, the anti-life equation explained living beings and spirits. Worst of all, it could prove that free will was an illusion. A power that could override free will and control minds would destroy true life. In some places on Earth, this incantation had been etched into the surface since ancient wars. Darkseid had once blasted a fragment of it with his warhammer, but his first attempts failed. As Darkseid probed humanity and the planet, he discovered fragments of the anti-life equation embedded in human consciousness came from Earth itself. The old gods had found portions of the anti-life equation after repelling Darkseid long ago, but they did not understand its true nature. The various pantheons divided fragments among themselves and brought them back to the celestial realm for study. Darkseid's campaign to conquer the celestial realm was not mere vengeance or greed. He wanted to seize those fragments the gods had hoarded. That was his aim. The theft of a mother box during his earlier attack on Earth had been a stratagem, a means to increase his odds, while the real prize was the anti-life equations scattered across the world. The remaining pieces are on Earth, Darkseid said, his gaze cutting across the void. The rest of this war will be to take Earth and complete the final piece of the anti-life puzzle. On Oa, Gowli returned to the Justice League with the Ion Shark at his side, confidence radiating off him. Oa has already felt Darkseid's cruelty, he told them. Earth could be next. I suggest we return immediately to defend it and leave only the surviving Green Lantern Corps here to rebuild Oa. His counsel was sensible, and the League agreed. Even Superman had to apologize that he could not spare resources to rebuild Oa. The priority now was Earth. Only Bruce Wayne felt something off and asked bluntly, "Why are you giving orders like that? Aren't you coming back to guard Earth with us?" Gowli smiled. "Your instincts are sharp. I won't stay. I plan to leave Earth for a time to continue searching the universe for lantern beasts." "Mr. Wayne leaves again?" Barry protested. "If Bruce isn't here, I always feel uneasy." Bruce frowned. "Do you really have to leave at a moment like this? The risks are too great." Gowli shook his head. "I need to find the lantern beasts to reduce risk. Darkseid's power now looks overwhelming. Even I lack confidence in defeating him. The fastest way for me to increase my strength is to capture and contain as many lantern beasts as possible." He meant what it sounded like. The higher one's level of power, the harder it was to grow further. For someone of Gowli's stature, subduing lantern beasts offered a huge boost in strength, efficient and necessary. Bruce hesitated. "But what if you haven't found them before Darkseid attacks?" Gowli's previous hunts across the cosmos had given him a rough idea of where the major lantern beasts might be. Where he had once used Parallax forcibly, now he could rely on Yu Shi Huang and Ion Shark as well. With the combined senses of 3 great lantern beasts, his range and accuracy had improved dramatically. To keep their plans secure, he did not correct Bruce's doubts. "I'll do my best. If I can't secure them in time, I'll return to Earth as fast as I can." Diana supported the plan. "It's sound. Boosting his power now is the right move." "If this were the Darkseid we remembered, maybe Gowli could handle him," Bruce said. "But the Darkseid we face now is different." Gowli nodded. "Be careful while I'm gone. Bruce, don't die. All of you must hold on until I return." They all promised to try. Arthur, trying to cut the tension, laughed hollowly. "Maybe Apocalypse will be so spent from revenge that their strength will be less than 1% and will beat them easily." Gowli let himself smile. "Let's hope so." He opened a wormhole, sending the League back to Earth, then touched his ring. The colorful Bifrost arcs down and carried him deep into the universe. The Justice League, separated from Gowli, immediately delivered grave warnings to governments worldwide. Their credibility was unmatched. These were not ordinary intelligence sources, but Earth's most powerful heroes. Batman prepared a detailed report for the United Nations Security Council. Darkseid, the tyrant of the multiverse, was planning a full-scale invasion of Earth. The news hit like a supernova. Leaders convened emergency security councils, and diplomats rushed between ministries. In the White House, the president called in the Pentagon. War rooms groaned under the weight of strategy and contingency planning. The Secretary of State scrambled to coordinate allies and build a unified defense. In the European Parliament, former disputes were set aside as EU leaders pooled technology, intelligence, and superpowered assets. The British Prime Minister urged multinational scientific projects to develop defenses against extraterrestrial arms. The French president proposed building local superhero task forces modeled on the League. In Moscow, the Federal Security Council quietly discussed reactivating Cold War facilities and welcoming technological cooperation with the League to brace for Darkseid. Australia, Brazil, South Korea, Japan, India, and other nations mobilized their best scientists and strategists. Aerospace firms like Fadian beefed up space monitoring. Metahumans gained unprecedented state attention, becoming strategic assets in the fight ahead. Under the Justice League's leadership, Earth's governments moved with a unity and determination the world had never seen, weaving an intercontinental defense network where each node embodied human ingenuity and courage. They fought for a sliver of hope against an almost unbeatable enemy. Meanwhile, the world of magic was in even greater panic. Mages found their summoning rituals failing and spells to consult the gods dead in the water. For reasons unknown, the gods had vanished or been silenced. Whether the gods were dead or hiding, the magical community felt the absence like a wound. If even the gods could not stand against the coming storm, what chance did lesser mages have? A consensus formed in the magic world: practice the most resilient magics. Night magic, in particular, proved durable. The rules of the Endless Lord set certain magical debts and rights, and as long as those rules were honored, night magic could be considered something the practitioners themselves owned and relied upon. Under that protection, mages began to harden, training in the magics that would least depend on vanished divine favor, steeling themselves for the end that seemed to be closing in. Section 230. This power was different from the old God-blessed gifts or those who borrowed a deity's strength. It would not fail if the great one behind it fell. It was simply the most secure source of power in the magic world. In a crisis, you could trust yourself before anyone else. Besides, the Endless Lord had never failed since he appeared. His record alone was a symbol of might. Even so, the top mystics had gathered: Dr. Fate, the Spectre, the Phantom Stranger, Old Shazam, and others. They met again to plan counters the way they had during the giant ferocious beast crisis. The threat was unmistakable. Darkseid's target was clearly Earth, and even the unreliable God King Nabu had been drawn in. Under a sky gone black as a rising tide, apocalypse descended. Darkness surged through the heavens, blotting out stars, swallowing sun and moon. A chill aura soaked the air and pressed on every breath. At the front of the invasion strode the dark elites, towering figures in impenetrable armor, each step shaking the ground. Behind them surged the endless Paradman host. Their roars converged into a single, terrifying sound wave that struck straight at the human heart. Every government and military had long since been put on full alert. They knew this moment would decide humanity's fate. Soldiers in fortresses and scientists in labs wore grave faces. The troops gripped their weapons with determined eyes, but fear was visible beneath the determination. Facing an enemy who seemed to blanket the sky, humanity felt small as a boat on a vast ocean. "Fire!" the commander ordered. Artillery and missiles stitched the sky toward Apocalypse's fleet. The impact sounded like distant thunder, explosions after explosions, but those strikes were only nuisances to the dark elites. Their defenses laughed off the barrage as if it were rain. One by one, dark new gods detached from the formation. They were not colossal in stature so much as colossal in presence. Every movement radiated mountain-like power and sent earthquake tremors through the earth. Their cold, implacable gazes regarded humans as nothing more than ants. Darkseid watched from atop a vast command ship, his eyes sweeping the cities below. With a casual flick of his finger, beams of dark energy rained down, cutting through the human defenses like paper. Fortresses that had seemed impregnable disintegrated. "How boring," Darkseid said. "I expected a bit more challenge than the old wars." A kindly old woman at his side chuckled. "They prepare and pray, but they don't understand true power." "Enough," Darkseid thundered. "Today this small planet will taste despair." Below, the people stared up in helpless fear. Soldiers fought on, but morale crumbled. From the top of a skyscraper, a young man's fingers tightened on a missile launch. An almost ceremonial act of defiance. The missile streaked toward an Apocalypse battleship, trailing fire. For a moment, hope flared. Then a black beam sliced the sky and obliterated it. The blast's shockwave caught the young soldier. He tumbled from the high rise like a puppet with a severed string. Darkseid looked on without expression. To him, human resistance was a mantis before a chariot. "Is this Earth's full strength?" he mocked. "How disappointing." Earth was the only world with a record of defeating him. That fact fueled a rare personal interest. But the campaign had barely started, and despair already hung heavy. Civilians prayed for gods to descend, and unknowingly their last hope had already been crushed. The gods they counted on were falling into Apocalypse's hands. In this darkest hour, humanity had to rely on itself. Still, soldiers fought. Their courage showed on faces worn with fear, though their weapons proved helpless. The Paradman tide overwhelmed every line. Cities crumpled, mountains were razed, oceans blackened, the world seemed to drown in apocalypse. When Kalabak, Darkseid's eldest, boomed his world-shaking laughter, the new god's eerie power collapsed Earth's defense grids. Parademon hosts swept through streets like a relentless flood, leaving ruins and silence in their wake. On battlefields, a soldier watched comrades fall and spat, "Our weapons are useless. There's no way to win." Darkseid's contempt made victory obvious to him. Humanity held no serious threat. The same tragedies replayed across the globe, screaming, praying, pleading, but the outcome seemed set. Humanity's final card was desperate and terrible. Nuclear warheads ascending like furious dragons, carrying the last hopes of a dying species. Their contrails slashed brilliant lines across the sky. But as the bombs neared the apocalypse fleet, Darkseid waved. The warheads froze in midair, suspended as if time itself had paused. It was a mockery. They actually believe these toys will hurt the Lord? Kanto, the god of assassins, sneered. Pathetic. Governments refused to give up. They attempted remote detonations, and skyborne nuclear blasts lit the heavens with planet-rending roars. The combined yield dwarfed even the Tsar Bomba, humanity's most powerful strike. Still, before Darkseid, the released energy was nothing. He crushed the exploding forces with a single hand and gathered them into a gigantic fireball, compressing the fury into a living meteor of heat and light. "Look at your so-called trump card," he said, and hurled the fireball down. It cut a long arc through the atmosphere and slammed into the surface. The sky glowed crimson. On impact, the fireball detonated in an apocalypse of sound and light. The ground trembled as if the world itself screamed. Buildings vaporized, streets and people were incinerated in an instant. Cities became seas of flame. A shockwave swept outward like a hurricane, overturning distant towers and snapping trees. The air itself shimmered and warped from the heat. For humanity, it was the darkest page in history. Several cities were erased. Leaders watched satellite feeds with hollow, stunned faces. "Humanity can no longer resist this enemy," one whispered. No answer came, only a silence full of fear. Before Darkseid, everything human seemed fragile and insignificant. Amid the ash and flame, Dr. Fate had completed his transformation into the full god King Nabu. He stood atop a ruined skyscraper, a golden figure against the dying light, clad in gleaming armor and a jeweled crown. His eyes burned with divine fire. The leaders of the magic world, rallied by Nabu, led the sorcerers in a titanic stand against the dark new gods. Old Shazam stood at Nabu's side, his robes whipping in the wind, his face set with defiant resolve. He threw back a massive hand and hurled lightning that met the shadow forms of the dark new gods with thunderous collisions. "For order and light, we do not retreat," Nabu's voice rang out, bolstering every magic user. The dark new gods were huge and numerous, each wielding immense weapons and shaking the earth with every step. Their numbers alone threatened to overwhelm the magic masters, and as genuine deities, their individual power surpassed most mystical champions. Even so, God King Nabu and Old Shazam occupied a higher plane. Time and again, they turned back the new god's assaults by drawing on deep magics and hard-won skill, fighting with the full might of the magic world. The magic masters led the charge, sweeping across the battlefield with terrifying speed and precision. Every strike landed like a scalpel, clean and lethal. The old Shazam wizard drew his power from the six gods, and miraculously, he had remained in his Shazam state even after the heaven world's destruction. That meant the six gods' power still flowed through him. In that form, he could even hold his own against Superman. But as the fight dragged on, the numerical advantage of the dark new gods began to tell. No matter how mighty a single opponent might be, sheer weight of numbers mattered, especially when every enemy was a true god. Wave after wave of new gods surged forward, and the mages of the magic world were slowly overwhelmed. Even titans like God King Nabu and the old Shazam could not reverse the tide. "We need a new opening," God King Nabu said, a flash of urgency in his eyes. "You and I unleash everything together and break their formation." "All right." Old Shazam nodded, worry shadowing his face. They exchanged a look and raised their hands, voices joining in complex chant. As the incantations finished, blinding light burst from them. Around God King Nabu, an enormous, glittering Egyptian ankh and chains formed. Old Shazam's hands crackled with lightning. The two forces met and fused into a single massive beam that tore toward the dark new gods, ranks like divine wrath. Break for me! Their combined blast ripped a huge hole in the enemy line. But the new gods did not falter. If anything, their assault grew more ferocious, pouring through the gap in relentless waves. Facing so many gods, the magic world simply could not hold. Despite their best efforts, Nabu and Shazam failed to turn the battle. The Justice League, meanwhile, stuck to the plan they'd come up with at the outset: take out the leader. It was painful to divert from the rescue, but Bruce, clear-headed as ever, argued that unless Darkseid fell quickly, casualties would only multiply. To save time, I'll try to take you directly from the mirror world into the heart of the Apocalypse warship, Bruce said. He drew on his advent deck even as he fought, and the air around him shifted, currents swirling, mists forming, wind rising. The card he pulled was golden, patterned with a half wing. A blue vortex spun in its background. Bruce's advent visor changed in response. Survive. When he slotted the survive card, the mirror-like armor splintered and reassembled into the Kamen Rider Knight Survivor form. Ready, Bruce breathed. We can't hold back. Humanity hangs in the balance. They nodded and entered the mirror world. The passage allowed them to cross great distances instantly. For short periods, even ordinary humans could survive there, and the heroes' greater durability made it easier still. In moments, they pierced the core of the Apocalypse fleet. From inside the mirror world, they could still see the outside. Recon confirmed it. Darkseid sat at the heart of the flagship. The warship itself was a hulking black fortress, its interior a labyrinth of corridors like a hive. At the center rose a towering control spire that reached toward the ship's core. Everything inside glowed a deep blood red. Through a rift in the mirror world, the Justice League, Superman Clark, Wonder Woman Diana, Batman Bruce, Aquaman Arthur, Flash Barry, and Cyborg Victor dropped into the flagship as if descending from the sky. Their arrival flashed like lightning through glass, cutting the darkness. Darkseid. Clark's voice rolled like thunder, his eyes suddenly golden as solar power flared through him. In the brief time before the battle, he'd flown into space to soak up sunlight, increasing his strength. He was first to charge, fists humming with raw energy. Diana followed, sword raised. Arthur gripped his trident, summoning water and storm. Barry circled like a bolt of lightning to weave a speed force trap. Victor became a walking battery and cannon. Bruce activated his finishing move in survivor form, Hurricane Slash, bringing Hurricane Wings Dark Invader to bear as a drill. Their onslaught should have been catastrophic. Darkseid barely moved. He caught Clark's charging fists as though feeling a breeze, arrested Diana's sword in mid-swing, and deflected the night waves, Flash's speed force, and Cyborg's beams with effortless economy. Even the League's combined assault, a barrage of planet-shaking force, seemed to roll off him like water. He was composed, even amused, treating their encirclement like a child's plaything. Kalibak, drawn by the commotion, was poised to leap in, his strength rivaling Superman's, only to be held back by Desaad and Granny Goodness. Wait, Desaad warned. Let His Majesty vent himself. They are his playthings. Kalibak blinked. He had never been the favored son, and he rarely heard such restraint in Darkseid's expression. He realized with a chill that Darkseid's patience had finally worn thin. Darkseid's hand flicked once. A wave of dark energy swept the flagship, and the entire ship shuddered as if it might come apart. Rumble, the vessel moaned. The Justice League, driven back by the shockwave, were thrown across the decks, battered. Do you think you can harm me with this? Darkseid's voice was cold. I had some expectations for you, but you're nothing but ants. We are the Justice League. Clark snapped back, voice steeled. Even if we're ants in your eyes, Mr. Wayne taught us, many ants can bite an elephant to death. Clark gathered himself and launched again. This time, he dug into something beyond ordinary power, a desperate, idealistic burst. In his third strike, he poured everything he had into a sudden, explosive surge of solar energy. Previous attacks had been impressive, but this was different. In that brief instant, Clark reached a level that actually threatened Darkseid. Darkseid stiffened, forced onto a defensive posture, and had to marshal his full power to save himself. That left nothing spare to protect the flagship. The backlash of their combined assault tore into the ship. The Apocalypse flagship, already strained by the dark energy tremor, began to fracture and fall apart. Darkseid's face betrayed genuine surprise. Clark's burst had exceeded his expectations. Superman's greatest strength had always been his capacity for such surges at critical moments. In regular form, there were many who could match him, but a desperate, idealistic explosion of effort could push him far beyond his usual limits, like Kamen Riders or Ultramen, whose power spikes in a single, transcendent moment. This time, that spike forced Darkseid to defend himself, and the ship paid the price. But the League's attack was not perfectly synchronized. Their assaults arrived in micro-staggered increments rather than a single, unified strike. It was as if the seven lights that could have merged into one white beam remained separate colors, striking together but never fusing. That meant Clark's burst did not coincide exactly with the rest of the League's attacks to land the decisive blow on Darkseid. The window of vulnerability closed as quickly as it opened. By the time they all landed back on the deck, Clark's glow had faded and he was gasping for breath. Nearly half the solar charge he'd stored had been spent. "Commendable," Darkseid said, clapping slowly. "If I'd lacked some of the preparations that increased my strength, you might have wounded me and opened a tiny path to victory, however small. There are no ifs in war. The Justice League could not take another chance." Barry knew, from his doomsday encounter, that facing this level of adversary, he might not have time to reverse events once they turned bad. Theoretically, someone could hide, wait, and then use the Speed Force to reverse time from a safe distance. Barry's speed and resonance techniques were terrifying. In the right conditions, he could even overcome a Kryptonian's defenses. Gao Li possessed time reversal powers as well. But the contingencies were precarious. Dark gods like Darkseid could track temporal shifts and act across the river of time. Even if Barry were at the opposite end of the cosmos, a temporal jump could still put him within Darkseid's reach. Everything was desperate. The League had only one viable option: to go all in, to risk everything for a one-hit chance at ending Darkseid's reign. They had to strike as though there were no tomorrow, because for humanity, there might not be. Section 232, that's the fight. As long as they haven't completely fallen, they'll never give up. Keep fighting until the last moment. Bruce gritted his teeth and pushed himself up, pulling another advent card from its cartridge. Believe in Gao Li. Believe that he'll come back. Everyone in the Justice League nodded silently, eyes fixed on Darkseid as the Great War flared again. Far out in the universe, a rare trace of anxiety crossed Gao Li's face. The moment the Apocalypse Army descended, his preset quantum comms had alerted him. He was watching the clock and confronting a huge, ugly orange serpent before him. Ophidian, the orange lantern beast of greed. "You're the last lantern beast. Sorry, but I'm in a hurry. I'll have to be rough." Gao Li said it coldly and raised his hand toward the snarling Ophidian. From the other lantern beasts he had already subdued, Gao Li knew Ophidian was formidable. Using force felt necessary, no easier than dealing with parallax. "Human, orange light energy is mine. All spectral emotions belong to me. You won't take them." Ophidian's roar met a sight it hadn't expected. Red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple energies, 6 colors, coalesced into a 6-colored chain that bound it fast. "What, you can fuse the emotional spectrum?" Ophidian's shock was enormous, but its struggles were futile against the combined might of the 6 lanterns. This was even worse than Parallax's desperate end. There was a difference, though. Gao Li had beaten Parallax nearly to death before absorbing it. Ophidian was at full strength and resisted more. Still, the outcome was inevitable. Before long, Ophidian suffered the same fate as Parallax, absorbed into Gao Li and imprisoned within him. Gao Li gained the orange light and became the Orange Lantern Lord, now the Lord of the 7 Lanterns, holding supreme authority over the 7-colored emotional spectrum. "All right then," Gao Li murmured. He extended both hands. 7 rings, one on each finger, flared and lifted, turning into beams of light that coalesced on his right index finger. In an instant, a shimmering white light ring formed. 7 lanterns united, white light power. Gao Li drew a breath and opened a spatial wormhole with that white light, stepping through to Earth. The moment he arrived, his immense power swept the globe, and he couldn't help but gasp. Of the original 8 billion people, only tens of millions remained, and they were on the brink of death, their numbers still falling. Apocalypse clearly intended to exterminate humanity. Darkseid's objective was the anti-life equation, To him, ordinary humans were worthless. Slavery? Apocalypse had plundered countless races from parallel universes. One more or less human meant nothing. Gowley's gaze fell on the battlefield. Among countless ruins lay the fallen members of the Justice League. Clark was the last to fall. He hit the ground, already breathless. If Superman was like this, the others were worse. None of them showed signs of life. Gowley hadn't expected things to degrade so far in his brief absence. Darkseid was stronger than he'd imagined. Rage swelled. He calmed himself and switched to the double driver. Shining Pterodactyl and Extreme Hawk swept in and slotted automatically into the ends of the driver. Gowley opened a wormhole to retrieve the Speed Force memory. Transform. Glitter. Extreme. Between holy light and pulsing data streams, Gowley became Kamen Rider. He slotted the Speed Force memory into the finisher slot and activated it. Speed. Maximum drive. Like Cyclone Joker Extreme, the Extreme memory could amplify multiple memories at once. Gowley planned to use 3 memories simultaneously. He felt a shift in the air. Someone important had arrived. On the other side, Darkseid had noticed. During the reconnaissance that preceded the invasion, Darkseid had confirmed that the strongest being on Earth, the mysterious Endless Lord, was likely the only one he truly needed to worry about. He had timed the invasion, knowing the Endless Lord was in the universe, not on Earth. The strategy had been to achieve results before the Endless Lord could return. Now the Endless Lord had returned. Time and space showed subtle distortions, and Darkseid sensed them. So that's it. A childish trick, he snorted. How naive. With a thought, he stepped above the river of time. Beings of supreme power could view timelines. Darkseid could traverse them easily. As he leapt from the river, he saw Gowley running with Speed Force energy. Since their positions on the river of time were near each other, Gowley's movement fell within Darkseid's reach. That, Darkseid thought, was the Endless Lord's mistake. As long as Darkseid was present, Gowley could not simply reverse time and space at will. Pay the price for your naivety, Darkseid said darkly. He emanated a suffocating aura and condensed a monstrous assault that roared forward like a titanic dragon. The attack held world-shattering power, devouring life and light, a torrent of scorching black flame that vaporized matter and energy, tearing the fabric of dimensions. It formed a massive vortex whose residual force threatened to unravel the timeline itself. This was Darkseid at full power, an attempt to kill. Gowley, however, remained calm. He didn't even glance back. When the assault struck, his body erupted with brilliant light, and like a stubborn boulder in a raging river, he stood unmoved. Darkseid's attack could not shake him. How is that possible? He can actually withstand this? Darkseid was stunned. He'd known of Gowley's shining memory, an ability that could nullify attacks, but even so, no one should shrug off a full-power assault like this. Darkseid had studied countless power systems from conquered universes. He refused to believe anything truly invulnerable existed. Yet there Gowley stood, unharmed, and suddenly began to run even faster. The Speed Force memory, amplified by the Extreme memory, pushed him to the peak speed Barry had ever achieved. Darkseid and his assault could no longer catch up. Time itself began to rewind irresistibly. Chapter 249. The World Reconstructed Here. A flash like all the stars exploding at once made it impossible to look directly at the light. Then everything fell silent, as if the world had frozen. Time began to flow backward. Ruined cities mended themselves. Shattered panes folded back into frames. Cracks smoothed away. Bombed-out skyscrapers rebuilt brick by brick. Steel and concrete knitting back together as if unmaking destruction. The dead returned one by one, like a film played in reverse, their ashes retreating, life rekindling in their eyes. Gowley completed his task and slipped back into the timeline. Darkseid snorted and did not pursue him immediately. He retreated to Earth. Gowley didn't need to be chased. He returned to the same place on Earth to wait. Glitter. Maximum drive. The moment Darkseid re-entered the timeline, Gowley activated Extreme Drive. The Spear of Destiny, carrying an almost unimaginable momentum, aimed for Darkseid's head. Gowley had planned this. The spear had the property of bypassing defenses under the right conditions, so even Darkseid might not escape it unless he anticipated the pattern. Whoosh! A glittering flash burst from nowhere. Darkseid's pupils constricted, and he raised an arm to block the spear's path. With a ripping sound, like a blade through fruit, Darkseid, whom even a fully unleashed Superman had failed to harm, found the spear sinking deep into his bones. His famed defenses seemed ineffective. Skin that had resisted Zeus's lightning was pierced as if it were paper. "What?" the Dark New Gods cried, stunned by what they saw. For many of them, it was unimaginable. Darkseid's first injury in nearly 10,000 years. Just like the intelligence said, it almost ignores defenses. "How can such an absurd ability exist?" someone whispered. The spear continued to press forward, even as Darkseid slammed his arm to the side and swung his head the opposite way to force displacement. That movement, the arm fixed by the shaft of the spear, allowed him to redirect the blow and ultimately make the spear miss. Darkseid had expected that his arm might be pierced. By using the grip of the spear shaft and his own momentum, he'd created the chance to avoid death. Gao Li frowned. The shaft should also possess the spear's armor-ignoring property, but different parts of the spear had different sharpness. The tip was far sharper than the shaft. Although both could penetrate Darkseid, the tip's faster penetration had given Darkseid a sliver of time to maneuver. Without Darkseid's momentary re-entry into the timeline and Gao Li's ambush advantage, it wouldn't be so easy to hit him again. "Interesting," Gao Li said softly. "You're even more formidable than I imagined." Section 233, Darkseid decisively severed his own arm, throwing distance between himself and Gao Li as he readied for a proper duel. The wound knit back almost as soon as it appeared, flesh and bone reforming at a speed that was plainly visible. Gao Li leveled the Spear of Destiny at him. "I'll give you a chance to retreat. Cherish your life," he said. Darkseid only smiled and shook his head. "Endless Lord, you are powerful, but your greatest weakness is this burden called Earth. You yourself may not be my true equal. I already have some guesses about your abilities. I'll test them one by one." In those few movements, Darkseid had seen an invincible defense and an invincible anti-defense. Yet that very apparent invincibility told him something else. Absolute, limitless power never existed within the multiverse without balance. Every miracle had a price. If a power looked invulnerable in one domain, it must have a clear limitation in another. So where is the flaw? Darkseid wondered. He refused to guess wildly, but if physical attacks failed, he would try the non-physical. Or worse, he would try something that wasn't an attack at all. He reached out toward Gao Li. Instantly, the world inverted. This was no metaphor. Time and space buckled and collapsed. Everything around Gao Li blurred, as if some crushing, invisible pressure squeezed reality together. He tried to steady the fabric of space with his power and found it useless. He felt an invisible hand compress him, take his breath, freeze his movements. The universe seemed to funnel toward him. All things converged under an irresistible, annihilating force. What will you do when time, space, and dimensions themselves collapse and squeeze toward you? Darkseid asked, eyes alight with destructive glee. The aura around him chilled the moment. His slightest gesture made dimensions tremble and crack. The glitter memory can't make you immune to the collapse of time and space themselves. Gao Li thought, alarmed, as cracks began to spider across the void, giant mouths devouring everything, exhaling a phantom rumble as something ancient stirred. Energy speared out of those void fissures and braided with Darkseid's power, a scene of apocalypse unrolling. Darkseid grinned and stopped probing. He unleashed his full power. Gao Li poured out infinite magic to meet him. Light blasted up, a golden pillar, and for a moment, Darkseid's expression faltered as the spatial compression began to break. But what met him now was no simple trick. The glow carried the unmistakable sigil of the Lord of Magic. "You broke the glitter memory's effect," Gao Li said calmly from within the light. As the radiance dissipated, Gao Li stood revealed in his strongest state, Kamen Rider wizard, limitless golden Oryu style. Glitter memory, being rule-based, excelled at surprise. This form was Gao Li's concentrated supremacy, infinite magic, the power of Gabriel, the power of creation, the white light of life, 4 primal forces in one vessel, leveling him with even Darkseid. Finally, "This is the battle I've wanted," Darkseid snarled, a bloodthirsty smile splitting his face. Around him, Kanto, Calabac, Granny Goodness, and other Dark New Gods pushed forward, eager to join. "Your Majesty, allow us." "You go and wipe out the resurrected humans and the Justice League," Darkseid ordered, voice iron. The Endless Lord is mine. The new gods bowed. Kalibak, as always blunt and short-sighted, bristled. But your strength can lay waste anywhere, but against the Endless Lord now, there's only one outcome. Defeat, Darkseid said, amused by the worth of a true opponent. Then his imperiousness snapped back. Execute the order, or would you prefer I kill you first? Kalibak's bravado crumpled into fearful obedience. While Darkseid parried words with his lieutenants, Gao Li was not idle. He watched the dark elites and quietly gathered his creative power. He took a breath and said, "No regrets. I have done all I could." Darkseid's frown deepened. "What did you say?" Gao Li smiled up at the sky. "Not only did I act, but your apocalypse helped me. Unifying the wishes and desires of every person on Earth was difficult, except when survival itself becomes the single common desire. Under the Parademon threat, humanity's collective will narrow to one thing: survive. How powerful do you think a desire gathered like that can be?" Darkseid lunged instinctively, but it was too late. Gao Li had already finished. The vast power of creation he had been stoking exploded outward, reshaping the world with a solemn tolling bell. Creation here should be called reshaping, a force that, where belief and wish were strong enough, could act like a concentrated wish-granting engine. Gao Li contained its scope to planet Earth, to conserve energy, and make the effect as potent as possible. He could have simply erased the monsters on Earth, but Apocalypse was too vast. Parademons poured in endlessly. Instant annihilation would be meaningless if more swarmed in. Instead, Gao Li chose to empower humanity to protect itself, just long enough for him to finish Darkseid. The reshaping distributed abilities, defenses, and even temporary transformation tools so humans could hold their ground. A portion of that gathered desire was diverted for another purpose, to define Darkseid himself as a monster and expel him from Earth. Reshaping the space around them, Gao Li forced Darkseid to be ejected from the planet. Then, as the bell tolled, Gao Li and Darkseid vanished into nothing. Chapter 250, Everyone Like a Dragon. Hal awakens. The city's neon glittered against the night sky like a colorful dream. Behind it, Kong Che sat in a cramped rental room, terrified. He clutched himself and trembled, the darkness outside punctuated by low roars and distant, hungry growls, the Parademon army tightening its noose. Their eyes burned red, like emissaries of hell. His heart thundered. There was nowhere to run. Until yesterday, he had been an ordinary office worker with ordinary hopes. Overnight, the world had ruptured. Creatures from fiction and nightmare had become real. Society had collapsed. "It's over. It's all over," Kong Che muttered. Two boxes materialized on his table, like a gift and a curse. He opened the first. Inside lay a pitch-black device and a thick Core ID stamped with a simple grasshopper emblem. Information flooded his mind, as if someone had poured instructions directly into him. Desire driver, Core ID, how to use it. A blurred memory flashed, a warm smile and a voice. "Congratulations. It's only temporary, but you can be a Kamen Rider. Fight. Don't give up. Fight for what you believe. Your destiny is in your hands." Acting on instinct, Kong Che strapped the Desire driver to his waist and slid the Core ID into place. "Entry," he said as light consumed him. Black armor wrapped his form. The helmet, with its subtle grasshopper motif, took shape. "I am Kamen Rider Battler," he breathed, the system whispering the name into him. He opened the second box. Two buckles, each with a different pattern, waited inside. According to the downloaded knowledge, they were additional drivers or progrise-like devices, compatible with the system. He clipped both into the Desire driver and called out the activation names. "Typhoon. 01 driver." Mechanical arms materialized and locked to his upper left and lower right, bringing two new sets of armor. A peculiar sound effect echoed, rogue and sly. Then the system intoned in a mechanical voice. "Progrise, jumping up, rising hopper. A jump to the sky turns to a rider kick. Ready, fight!" Strength flooded Kong Che. The world Gao Li had reshaped had been tuned so that everyone could reach for their own power. The reshaping distributed the most suitable Core IDs and buckles to each person's circumstances, and the rider system temporarily imprinted the knowledge and combat techniques into their minds. These enhancements and memories would fade in roughly half a day. Enough time, Gao Li judged, to finish Darkseid. If it took longer than 10 hours, the sheer mass of Apocalypse forces would make any temporary empowerment meaningless. Kong Che vaulted through the window and landed among the slaughtering parademons outside. He swung his armored fist and connected with a green-skinned face. The surge of power sent parademons tumbling back, and outside, more and more Kamen Riders were joining the fight. The same scene was unfolding across the world. Almost every human had been given the ability to become a Kamen Rider, exactly the sort of power Gowli had hoped would let people seize their own fate in a crisis. Why almost? Because the power to reshape reality wasn't rigid. It judged each situation with flexibility. If someone already had enough combat power, there was no need to waste reshaping energy making rider equipment for them. That portion of power could be better used to help others. Take Hal Jordan, for example. If he could use his Green Lantern abilities, he would be far stronger than by simply putting on Kamen Rider armor. Armor would be an optional extra. The question was whether Hal could untie his own knot. If he couldn't, Gowli's failsafe would still give him a core ID and a buckle. Damn it, things really have come to this, Hal muttered. He watched the parademons swarm descending toward Coast City, the city he loved. After seeing the devastation of Oa, Hal felt like he was trapped in a nightmare every time he thought of Earth suffering the same fate. Everything and everyone he cared about would be gone. He needed power to stop that. Hal glanced instinctively at his Green Lantern ring and the Lantern core. Could he make a difference? The core on Oa had been crushed, and they had deemed him unworthy. Still, as he hesitated, a commotion outside snapped him to attention. Masked, armored figures were pouring out of houses and rushing straight into battle against the parademons. The sight shocked him, awake like a jolt of electricity. No, what am I waiting for? Even ordinary neighbors, people who'd never fought before, were finding courage. Whether the Green Lantern Corps approved of him or not, he wouldn't be seeking their validation now. He would be a Green Lantern to protect Coast City and the people he loved. That was what mattered. As if in answer to that sudden resolve, his ring flew from where it lay and slipped onto his finger. In an instant, Hal Jordan was reborn as a Green Lantern. Green energy poured through him, resonant with willpower. He shot upward and met the parademon horde in the sky. Out in deep space, time shivered, and Gowli and Darkseid stood facing one another. "So that's the trick," Darkseid said. "Using a petty ploy to move the battlefield?" Gowli didn't move them. He had reshaped the reality around them. Where they were fighting had been rewritten from on Earth to in the vacuum of space. He smiled faintly. "Here we can fight without restraint. Isn't that what you wanted?" Darkseid returned a chilling smile. "It will do. It doesn't hinder me. Then let us begin." The black flames in Darkseid's eyes flared, the Omega effect coalescing. His presence was like a consuming, cold inferno that burned away life and will. "First, test your strength. See if you can withstand this," he said, and unleashed an ear-shattering roar that carried even through the void. Omega beams shot from his eyes with unprecedented intensity, crimson streaks like meteors tearing through the cosmos. A bell of creation appeared out of nothing, and a huge luminous shield rose to meet the beams. It held, barely. The impact made the shield tremble, fissures spidering across its surface. Gowli's calm narrowed. "Not enough. Time for the new power I've taken." He tapped into the white of the emotional spectrum, the combined force of all 7 lantern lights. Not to imitate the cosmos' many rings, but to use his own emotional core. 7-color light condensed into a brilliant white orb in his palm, the crystallized will of his inner self. "Go," he commanded. The orb shot like a high-speed cannonball toward Darkseid. The beam was not huge, but it carried an utterly lethal pressure. Darkseid's eyes flicked with surprise. He hadn't expected Gowli to condense such a force. The orb struck the Omega beams and ruptured into a cataclysmic explosion, sending shockwaves that trembled even the surrounding starfield. The white light punched through the Omega attack and kept flying. The radiance that bloomed felt like the first warm morning sun, soothing to life. It seared Darkseid instead. He bristled and unleashed deeper, darker divine power to resist. 2 titanic forces clashed amid the stars. When the light finally dispersed, both combatants remained, each a living mountain. The first exchange was a draw. Their gazes met like blades, and space itself warped into a battlefield shaped by their aftermath. "Formidable," Darkseid admitted. "You may be the strongest opponent I've faced. I will not hold back." Neither will I, Gao replied. Magic of many elements flared from Gowli's hands in ribbons of light that tried to crush Darkseid's shadow. Darkseid countered with raw Omega energy, trying to obliterate Gowli outright. Their duel was like colliding supernovas. Dazzling beams braided and exploded into a vortex that pulled entire nearby stars inward. The ripples spread out and began to gnaw at galaxies. Darkseid thrust, sending a tide of dark energy to devour Gowli. Gowli's lights formed barriers to resist. He answered with forbidden spells, torrents of destructive magic smashing into the darkness. The two powers lapped at one another like opposing oceans, each surge threatening to overwhelm the other. Every strike shook the cosmos. Battleground aftershock ate at distant star systems. Galaxies trembled as gaps of annihilation opened and raced outward at faster-than-light speeds, devouring suns in their wake. Observers, wherever they watched from, gasped. This seemed a fight that didn't care how much of the universe it ruined. Gowli pushed harder, pouring more of his magic into a great luminous bulwark to push back the dark tides. He could dismantle divine energy with the right spells, and he used that edge. Still, something in Darkseid's darkness was odd, an element of high sophistication that allowed him to cling to parity even under Gowli's suppression. Gowli frowned. The pattern didn't make sense. Darkseid's divine force was being neutralized, yet somehow kept snapping back. Darkseid, for his part, was surprised too. He had siphoned part of the anti-life formula from the gods in his earlier campaign against the Heaven Realm, and that had helped him endure. Otherwise, the Lord of Magic's suppression would have overwhelmed him. Both had miscalculated the other's reserves. The fight had become not just a contest of energy, but a clash of wills that dragged deep into their reserves. Darkseid drew his sword of darkness, its black tip cutting streaks through the void. Gowli met the blade with a flare of brilliant light from his fingertips, and the collision exploded in a blinding radiance. Their battle ranged from raw, searing exchanges to reality-bending maneuvers. Timelines folded, and attacks from the past and future spilled into the present. Gowli cast massive magic circles to ensnare Darkseid. Darkseid used his dark dominion to shred those bindings. Space and time ripped and resealed, leaving dark fissures that swallowed light and life like nascent black holes. This was no ordinary duel. It threatened to unmake entire regions of existence. Chapter 51, A Universe-Ending Battle. Everywhere, people watched in horror as the sky tore. "What a terrifying battle," one whispered. "Is the universe going to be destroyed?" another cried. "Can this even be called a living thing anymore?" someone else shouted. Someone compared it to the War of Supremacy and said this was worse. The two titans fought on, each blow a thunderclap across reality. Section 235. Their battle had become the focal point of the entire universe. The sheer aftershocks, capable of influencing the motion of galaxies from countless light years away, drew the attention of innumerable beings and civilizations. Top-tier cosmic powers and solitary titans watched in every way possible. Few had ever seen such a magnificent clash. In Gowli and Darkseid's struggle, onlookers felt they were seeing the limits of power itself, perhaps even touching the edges of the grand omniverse. Neither side could be resisted. The world-shattering combat felt like the end of reality. Unsurprisingly, the cost to both Gowli and Darkseid was astronomical. Their auras had waned drastically from the opening of the fight. By now, each was weaker than a typical god-king in many respects. "I never expected this," Gowli sighed. He had gathered upgrades and augments unparalleled even among supreme beings, enough to rout any god-king in the heavenly realm with ease, yet he could not defeat Darkseid. "You are the biggest variable in my plan, Endless Lord." Darkseid shook his head. Inside, he was as stunned as Gowli. After so many years of preparation, having amassed dreadful enhancements that let him sweep the heavenly realm and ravage Earth, he had not expected to be stalled by the Endless Lord. Whether in past or future, Darkseid felt he might never again reach this level of might. It was the convergence of too many favorable circumstances. New Genesis. In the Father's palace, Isaiah stood by a window and watched the stars. His eyes gleamed with the epistemic calm of a being who sees beyond ordinary secrets. He had been watching the titanic battle between Darkseid and Gowli. Darkseid was his greatest nemesis, and every move mattered. The father had been shaken when Darkseid had earlier rampaged through the heavenly realm and scourged Earth. Darkseid was terrifyingly strong. Then the Endless Lord intervened, and the father was startled again. The Endless Lord relied not on magic debts, yet wielded power on an absurd scale. Earlier, the father had counted himself among the top beings of the Supreme Realm, at the summit of the universe. Now he understood that was merely the conventional peak. Both Darkseid and the Endless Lord had gone beyond it. Fortunately, for the father, their strengths were nearly matched, and both were being consumed heavily. The scale of their blows had already diminished. If he missed this moment, after billions of years, Darkseid might never be so vulnerable again. A dazzling singular star like the Endless Lord might appear only once. Though Apocalypse and New Genesis had a truce, the father was confident in his strength. A Darkseid reduced to this threshold could be finished, even by bearing the penalty of breaking his oath. He had no intention of acting alone. He would bring all the light new gods for safety. Darkseid was alone. Against such an evil, morality was irrelevant. Then again, the father considered a subtler plan. Wait until Darkseid and the Endless Lord had decided a victor, then move in to take advantage when Darkseid was even more exhausted. But that would be unseemly. Killing a helpless Darkseid would neither honor the father's oath-breaking bravado nor justify the betrayal. Better that Darkseid be merely weakened to the level of a god king, sufficiently dangerous to preserve the father's face while still ensuring victory. It is time, my children. The glory of New Genesis shall reappear in the universe today, the father declared. Yes, I have waited for this day. Excellent. The light new gods answered in unison, armor flashing under starlight, mother boxes and relics in hand. At the father's command, they formed a phalanx. Using their mother boxes together, they opened a massive boom tunnel and projected their legions straight to the cosmic battlefield where Gao Li and Darkseid dueled. Boom. Gao Li and Darkseid traded a tremendous blow. The ripples ignited planetary cores nearby and turned stars into nova. But that devastation was suddenly overlaid by another brilliance, the light of New Genesis. It flared like a scorching sun, tearing through the dark, bathing the cosmos in righteous radiance. At its center, the Father descended, leading countless light new god legions with indomitable authority. Gods, heed my command. His voice, magnified by divinity, rolled through the void like thunder. Today we establish a new order in this universe. Light shall be eternal. The light new gods surged like a tide. Their armor gleamed. Their artifacts unleashed beams of cleansing light. They vowed to wash the universe in their justice. Darkseid only sneered. Humph, Isaiah, you've come. Isaiah, the father said with measured gravity. Darkseid, do you understand your crimes and your fate? Darkseid scoffed. Of course, I know your hypocrisies. I knew you would use this chance to break the covenant and strike. Your ambitions and atrocities have provoked the universe, the father thundered. Countless civilizations and parallel worlds have suffered under you. Therefore, even if it pains me to violate my oath, I will do it. For light and justice, I will sacrifice that oath to eliminate you, the source of all evil. Darkseid's eyes glinted with mockery. Isaiah, do you think a few weak, light new gods can defeat me? The father did not flare into anger. He shone with unshakable conviction. Power does not lie in numbers, but in belief. Our belief in justice will smother darkness. And with that, the father led his army forward like a new dawn crashing into the abyss. Gao Li felt conflicted. This looked like a sidestep to steal a kill. If Darkseid died, Gao Li did not care, yet the father's sudden charge worried him. Darkseid, however, remained unnervingly calm, as though the light new gods and New Genesis themselves were mere dust. That composure meant Darkseid must have a hidden plan. Wait, Gao Li cried. Flames erupted over Darkseid's form. Isaiah, you are as foolish as ever, Darkseid sneered. I guessed you would come and saw through your hypocrisy. I prepared for you. I was waiting for you to break the covenant, he continued. That way, when I kill you, I will not suffer the backlash. The father froze. He had not imagined such cunning. If the father had been in Darkseid's shoes, he believed he would surely die. Darkseid was alone and weakened, yet he acted as if he were confident. The father still thought Darkseid might be bluffing. There was nothing to fear, he told himself. Then, like a plague, the light new gods began to scream. One after another, Starting with the weakest, they fell into unearthly cries. Their divine power began to collapse and dissipate, vibrating with the wails. The father had not seen any physical attack. What was happening? It looked as if the very knowledge or information of Darkseid's existence, the pattern of him, was corrupting those who perceived it. The flame cloaked Darkseid wholly, and the Omega effect flared in his eyes with unprecedented brightness. Then it shot outward toward the father. Boom! The father tried to evade but felt an impossible lock settle on him. The Omega beam struck dead center. Ah! The father's cry tore the void. The mighty light god king was charred black and smoking, flung through space like cosmic debris. Meteoron, second in command of New Genesis and wielder of the Mobius chair, felt a chill. The father, the strongest of the light new gods, had been killed in a single strike by Darkseid. It was beyond belief. No, impossible, Meteoron whispered, staring in horror. His Mobius chair began to compute frantically. The chair contained the universe's knowledge. Perhaps it could explain this. A string of symbolic feedback scrolled through Meteoron's perception. Loneliness plus alienation, fear, despair, self-worth, mockery, condemnation, misunderstanding, guilt, shame, failure, judgments Y, where Y equals hope and N equals folly, love equals lies, life equals death, self equals Darkseid, all belongs to Darkseid. The Mobius chair's formula snapped into place. Because Darkseid had not concealed himself, had in fact thrown himself open, the chair read and understood what it beheld. Anti-life equation. Meteoron screamed, and then his eyes went blank, like a marionette cut of its strings. Darkseid did not need secrecy. He needed to reveal himself. The anti-life information poured from him, a contagious pattern that infected minds and souls. In contrast, for Meteoron to willingly invite the anti-life equation into his mind would have been pure suicide. Correct. Unfortunately, you discovered it too late. Darkseid said at first in a faint voice, then gave a sudden, maniacal laugh. At last, I have assembled the anti-life equation in its entirety. Gowley's pupils snapped shut. It wasn't that he didn't want to save New Genesis, but when the soul fire spread through Darkseid's body, it began to infect Gowley as well. Only the tenuous link between his four supreme powers let him barely withstand the contamination. Even so, he had suffered grievous losses and could only shield himself temporarily. He stared at Darkseid in stunned realization. Even without the equation's corruptive ability, Darkseid's power now far exceeded his earlier peak. When had he grown so strong? Darkseid had always been the consummate schemer, hiding his intent beneath layers of guile. Apocalypse dwarfed Earth in scale. Its parademon ranks alone outnumbered all of Earth's inhabitants. Darkseid had the manpower not only to annihilate Earth, but to sweep it clean in a coordinated search for fragments of the anti-life equation. The equation wasn't a physical object. Thanks to night magic, Darkseid needed only to glean the equation's information, a sight, a sound, a memory, and it would stitch itself together in his mind with any fragments he had already collected. The result would be a whole anti-life equation and the supreme power that came with it. Still, Darkseid had held back. Expecting an ambush from the light new gods, he played coy and let his prize go unplayed, baiting the father into acting. If the father hadn't shown himself, Darkseid planned to surprise Gowley with the completed equation. It was the safest, most certain route to victory, to use the equation to end the Endless Lord unexpectedly. Then the father, breaking his vow, attacked. Darkseid showed no mercy. He activated the anti-life equation and in one catastrophic sweep, crushed the light new gods. He killed the father outright with a single contemptuous strike. In the time it took for shock to settle, the other light new gods were not slain but had their wills torn out, their eyes went hollow, their minds enslaved to Darkseid. Gowley felt a coldness deeper than any blade. This mind-twisting was far more terrifying than a simple massacre. From how casually Darkseid had destroyed the father, who should have been his equal among god-kings, it was clear Darkseid had reached a realm where slaying a god-king was as easy as killing a dog. Even burdened by the backlash of breaking the contract, the father's residual power should have been formidable, yet he couldn't withstand one move from Darkseid. If Darkseid wished it, annihilating all of New Genesis would be effortless. Instead, he bent their minds to his will. Gowley broke out in a cold sweat when Darkseid finished neutralizing New Genesis and turned his gaze toward him. The victor is decided, endless lord, Darkseid said, slowly raising a hand. You, weakened as you are, can never oppose me. Before Gowli could react, an invisible force of terrifying intensity erupted from Darkseid. It struck Gowli and hurled him backward with such speed that superluminal wasn't an adequate description. The shock shattered the space behind him. The push flung him into a burning nearby star. He tore through its corona, plunged straight through the flaming mass, and finally began to decelerate on the other side. Even that didn't trouble Darkseid. At his level, Gowli could be controlled across the universe as easily as if he stood beside him. Darkseid's expression flickered with curiosity as his sight pierced the star's blaze. Gowli, riding the lingering protection of his limitless form, forced a reversion to his original double driver and shifted into Glitter Extreme. How dull, Darkseid said with a sneer. Still clinging to that last illusion of yours? He shook his head. Glitter Memory and its Spear of Destiny were powerful, but Darkseid's might now shattered even rule-based abilities. No cosmological law could bind him. If Gowli relied on Glitter Memory to resist, Darkseid could cut right through it. Gowli's face tightened. There was no other option. He had to consume his final contingency. Since the giant ferocious beast incident, Gowli had taken to preparing contingencies like a seasoned strategist, always like Batman, keeping several plans in reserve. This ultimate contingency was a scheme he had only recently reached after vast study and the accumulation of tremendous power. Its chance of success was slim, its danger immense. If it failed, even Gowli would be turned to dust. He had long held himself back, waiting for conditions to be truly ideal. Miraculously, those conditions had now been met just before the battle. He produced a pure white memory from his palm. Before deactivating the limitless golden Oryu style, he had used a small reshape trick to extract and fashion this memory. Since he had only just consolidated the 7 emotional spectrums into life white light, he hadn't had time to naturally form a memory from that power, so he reshaped reality to forge one. This memory, labeled emotional, was the memory of life white lantern energy. Come forth, Prism Holy Shield, Gowli whispered. He reached into the void and called up a massive shield, studded with 4 memory slots. If the Spear of Destiny had been Glitter Memory's signature weapon, the Prism Holy Shield was the Extreme Memory's counter. Gowli reflected that the giant ferocious beast had once told him their universe was built on anti-crisis energy, the fusion of 7 creation-level powers. Now, he had gathered 7 powers of the same caliber. He filled the slots and named them aloud in a prayer and a dare. Emotional, the emotional spectrum, the core of the lantern powers, represented here as life. Speed, the speed force, extracted from Barry, the origin and font of lightning-swift motion. Life, the primal life force, seized via Poseidon's trident. Reshape, a true creation power from beyond the universe that bent reality's fabric. Glitter, drawn from little light, a concept at least on par with creation-level power. Unlimitedness, the pinnacle night magic, Gowli's own most fundamental force. Extreme, a concept distilled from Clark himself. Gowli had once thought of Extreme as merely an Earth-level Gaia memory, but the multiverse's structure argued otherwise. In the DC cosmology, major Justice League figures often corresponded to creation-level principles. Superman, uniquely, served as a core of hope for the multiverse. A concept born of him could not plausibly be small. He had, in effect, gathered 7 creation-level powers, 7 in 1, mirror to the 7 emotional spectrums fusing into white light. Emotional, maximum drive, he called. Speed, maximum drive. Life, maximum drive. Reshape, maximum drive. Glitter, maximum drive. Unlimitedness, maximum drive. Stream, maximum drive. Because of the Extreme and Glitter Memory's amplification traits, he could trigger maximum drive through the double driver without the critical slot. All 7 memories surged at once, their full intensity loosed. Normally, a memory formed from a concept would struggle to match the original's true power, but Stream's amplification could elevate a memory up to the level of its prototype. What Gowli attempted was unprecedented. He was effectively recreating the kind of force capable of shaping a multiverse inside his own being. The energy was beyond imagination. The maximum drive of 2 Gaia memories had nearly killed Kamen Rider W. The maximum drive of 7 creation-level Akashic memories could annihilate a lesser existence outright. Gao Li felt his soul and body shredding under the strain. The pressure screamed that his vessel could not contain such fusion. It's over. I can't hold it. His thoughts dissolved as consciousness blurred. Far away, Darkseid had been poised to strike the moment Gao Li began slotting memories, but then a cold dread tightened his chest. What could make him, who now threatened even the Origin, feel such a looming terror? He paused. In that breath of hesitation, Gao Li's body and mind seethed and finally, as if combusting from within, collapsed into ash. Darkseid watched the Endless Lord implode and merely nodded in bored indifference. What a boring ending, he muttered. Foolishly meddling with forces far beyond your capacity, without proper preparation, this is the inevitable result. He regretted only that he hadn't delivered the final blow himself. Perhaps this self-destruction was the most dignified end befitting a top-tier supreme being. Gao Li's last coherent thoughts were of life flashing by and of the cold arithmetic that had led him to this failure. He had never found a way to expand his capacity to hold creation-level power. He had relied on luck and stolen opportunities, and that luck finally ran out. Even as his essence scattered, Gao Li's final dull clarity conceded the truth. Without the necessary bearing, success had been impossible. He had gambled everything on a miracle, and the previous miracles had been just that, chance. As things stood, his luck had run out. It's truly too difficult to save everything, he thought. Such a heavy responsibility isn't suited for someone like me. Floating in an ethereal calm, Gao Li let out what felt like a sigh. He was by nature rational. In the end, he could accept the outcome of his defeat. Still, he could not help wondering how an ordinary person like him had come to shoulder the task of protecting everything. If he had been purely rational, he reasoned, he never would have pushed himself to fight Darkseid. Wouldn't it have been better to let Darkseid destroy Earth, or the universe, and then slip into a similar parallel world to live in? With the power he once had, that would have been easy. If he hadn't spent the collective wishes and desires on humanity, he would have had enough strength left to escape Darkseid, even after the villain obtained the anti-life equation. Looking at it this way, I did a lot of irrational things, he admitted to himself. He felt no regret. The reason was simple. Alfred, Zatanna, Bruce, Xiaoguang, Clark, those faces flashed through his failing vision. From the start, despite knowing he wasn't ready to face that giant ferocious beast, he had still plunged into hell. That same stubborn, illogical courage had driven him to everything he'd done since. The reason hadn't changed. He loved these people enough to abandon strict rationality to protect them. Seeing them like this, he felt a surge of unwillingness. If he failed, then fine. What about those he had fought to save? What would happen to them? Even though he no longer had a physical heart, he felt an illusion of one pounding in his chest. I'm not willing, he told himself. I've come too far. I used every possible means. I won't let them lose all because I fell. They gave me equal love. They were my protection as much as I tried to be theirs. Many of them were still fighting, protecting friends, family, the earth. How could I die here? Rationally, he knew he had failed, but some part of him refused to accept that finality. To rewrite this outcome, that would be a miracle. The only thing that could transcend the Gao Li who trusted science and reason, he realized, was the other side of himself, the emotional Gao Li, the part of him that could still believe miracles were possible. His imagined heart beat harder and harder, as if the embers of his soul were being rekindled. There was a truth about the universe that few remembered. Before magic entered creation, the concept of miracle had not existed. Even godlike power needed a touch of magic to enact miracles. Magic brought the category of the impossible into reality, and Gao Li had become the new Lord of Magic. In that role, he was, literally, the embodiment of miracles. Light exploded in the void, primordial light, the same as that which predated creation, blooming again in a new form. Darkseid, ready to witness the Endless Lord's final moment, froze. Gao Li, who had been nothing but ash, suddenly became solid. In that instant, an instant that stretched like eternity, Darkseid tried to intervene and found himself unable to catch up. It wasn't a simple trick of time dilation or stopping. With Darkseid's power, he could have broken through such manipulations. The real problem was that Gao Li's emergence was happening at a point before the multiverse itself, where time and space as concepts did not exist. In the monitor dimension, higher than the multiverse, Perpetua's creations shivered. The monitor, the anti-monitor, and the forger, Perpetua's own children, felt their realms quake. Even Barbatos, the fourth being who could barely be called a creator, looked on stunned. Their souls recoiled before the birth of a being that immediately pushed past their level, racing upward until it brushed even the mother of creation herself, Perpetua. They could not follow. This being's volume was immense, measured across time from the origin of space to the end of time, and the part they perceived was only his manifestation inside the multiverse. Gao Li had already ascended to the omniverse, and what the creators saw was merely a sliver of him. Perpetua opened her eyes in the source wall, shocked and furious. She felt Gao Li's existence, and more disturbingly, that his core was the unification of the 7 great creation powers. Some of those powers were ones she herself had used to fashion the multiverse. Others she did not recognize. What filled her with true horror was that, although both she and Gao Li wielded the 7 powers, he was already stronger than her at her peak. The reason was simple. The 7 great creation powers Perpetua had were not entirely hers. They had been granted by the origin judge of the omniverse. Gao Li's claim on those powers, however, was different. Infinite magic was his by nature. He had also brought a wholly new power of reshaping into existence. The power of extremity, though resonant with Superman's essence, had been extracted by a memory technology unfamiliar to the DC universe and belonged entirely to Gao Li. The glitter power, meant to trace back to God, had been liberated when the giant ferocious beast erased God's original mark and allowed Gao Li to imprint his own. Ownership of that power had transferred to him. By such reckonings, more than half of the 7 creation powers were completely in Gao Li's hands. He owned a majority share. Like a controlling stakeholder, he could command the unified entity those powers formed. That is why, rising into the omniverse, he left Perpetua far behind. Gao Li's ability to pull himself from certain death and radiate miracles was not a single neat trick, but the accumulation of countless small ones from his past, cohering into an unprecedented ultimate miracle. He realized, too, why there was only one true Gao Li across the parallel worlds, and why he could not enter timelines in which he already existed. At supreme levels, beings possess uniqueness in the multiverse. Their true body exists in one universe, while versions elsewhere are mere projections. Gao Li's uniqueness was stronger still. He could refuse to spawn projected clones across other timelines. He would not let the multiverse turn his copies into playthings. That refusal prevented projected selves from becoming footholds for rivals, the way Darkseid's projections once were in many parallel Earths. It also prevented paradoxes in which different versions of the same person tried to kill one another. Now ascended to the omniverse, Gao Li could bypass the DC multiverse and, from that higher vantage, reach into the Marvel multiverse as well. By filling the timeline, he became omnipresent at all points. Any given moment meant nothing special to him. To preserve causal logic, he could accommodate a past Gao Li when necessary, but he no longer needed and could not be squeezed into time segments where he already existed as another self. Understanding all this, he looked at Darkseid. The God King's face had lost its composed calm and become a mask of doubt and alarm. "You," Darkseid began, but his words trailed off as comprehension caught up. The fear he'd felt when trying to strike Gao Li before had not been illusion, it had been premonition. Gao Li's ascension created a certainty that transcended time. No action Darkseid might have taken, past or future, could have succeeded. Gao Li could, from the future, strike into the past to stop him. The point was immutable. Gao Li raised a finger to his lips. Instantly, Darkseid found he could no longer speak. "Silence during the time of judgment. Let everything return to dust," Gao Li intoned, and the command was like an act of creation. "Let there be light." As he spoke, reality conformed. Even the anti-life equation, powerful though it was within the multiverse, could not withstand Gao Li's will. The Omega effect drained from Darkseid's eyes. His existence began to unravel, dissolving into distortion. Not merely slain, Darkseid was removed from the story of the multiverse itself. From the beginning, Darkseid would no longer exist. The light new gods present vanished with him, returning to New Genesis. The origin would always tend toward balance. Another dark god might arise to fill the void, but none would be Darkseid again. That future was now irrelevant to Gao Li. "All right," he said softly, "let's go home." His body snapped back to Earth. In an instant, the world soothed, peace and serenity restored. Gao Li now had the certainty that he could handle any threat, that he could protect the people and the planet he loved. 10 years later, Section 238 Gotham City, Wayne Manor. Two half-grown boys were roughhousing on the lawn. One wore an impatient expression, every inch the arrogant, spoiled brat. The other, with a head of white hair and cute beast ears and a tail, was tangled up with him. His fur was mussed and his tail flicked in irritation. "Damn it, Light Wayne, you little— Let me go! Let go!" "I won't. Not until you call me Big Brother, Damien." Damien felt both humiliated and helpless. His skills should have been more than a match for Light Wayne, but he was being flattened by the kid's monstrous strength. "Who's going to call you Big Brother? You look 2 or 3 years younger than me." I grew 1 centimeter in the last few years. I'm actually older than you." "What does that have to do with anything?" "Don't kick me with your feet. You're getting dirt everywhere. Disgusting." "Even Dick calls him that. Why won't you? Aren't you Bruce Wayne's son?" "I haven't even acknowledged him as my father yet. If I'd known I'd have to deal with a dog, I wouldn't have come looking for him. I'm not a dog. I'm a wolf. You can't even tell the difference between such common mammals. What a dunce." Damien's head filled with question marks. "Where did I ever say I couldn't tell the difference? I was being sarcastic, you idiot. Can't you understand that?" "Huh?" Light Wayne blinked. "So you were being sarcastic? Sorry, I misunderstood. Wait, you were mocking me? That's worse." Facing Light Wayne's thick-headedness always felt like trying to punch cotton. Damien had the sharp words and sharp teeth, but no way to make them count. If your target doesn't even notice the mockery, then the mocker looks like a fool. "I'm seeing something new today," he ground out. "So being stupid can be a defense mechanism." "I'm not stupid. I have 10 doctoral degrees. Dad even called me a genius." Light Wayne lunged again, indignation making him more aggressive. Across the courtyard, Alfred poured tea for Gao Li and Bruce with his usual calm, a faint, rueful smile on his face. "Alas, young Master Damien truly will not submit to anyone. If only he were as obedient as young Master Dick. And young Master Light Wayne, I do miss how well-behaved he was when he first arrived." Gao Li snorted. "What kind of rosy picture do you have of Dick in your head? He's basically a walking human cannon now." Alfred's expression didn't change. "Well, it takes after Master Bruce. One gets used to it in time." "Cough, cough." Bruce choked slightly on his tea. He looked innocently offended. Why was everything always about him? Still, when he thought about Damien's origins, he had little ready defense, so he shifted the conversation. "By the way, Gao Li, didn't you and Clark thoroughly explore the Kamen Rider and Ultraman universes? Found any others?" "I'm still working through them. The Grand Omniverse connects countless universes. I just need to search through it methodically." Gao Li took a sip of tea, then set the cup down. "But there's no rush. I haven't even taken you all to the Marvel Universe yet." Bruce shook his head. "But you've brought friends from the Marvel Universe here before, haven't you? So it's not exactly unknown to us. I didn't expect you to be so powerful there, either." Gao Li hummed, pleased. "Some people say genius shines wherever it goes. In any case, our time is practically infinite. One day, we'll travel through every multiverse." Since discovering that the system's lottery energy could travel across time and space, Gao Li, after completing his ascension, had analyzed and replicated that energy. He succeeded in producing it himself. If he wanted, he could build a new system based on the original principles and give it to others. The idea intrigued him. "Maybe I'll create the ultimate tokusatsu system and send it back to my past self," he mused. The end of the book. Author's note on completion. Finally finished. Hooray! Some readers might feel there was still plenty left to write, and that's true. There's a lot in the comics that didn't make it in. But attentive readers may have noticed that the Marvel and DC worlds in this book are largely based on the movie versions. They aren't identical to the films, but the movies served as the primary templates, with some comic continuity elements mixed in. My original plan was to finish around Avengers 4. The later films disappointed me, so I didn't write them, and to include the Darkseid War arc for DC, which wasn't filmed. Both Avengers 4 and the Darkseid War can act as satisfying conclusions to a major phase. In my view, it's appropriate. After that point, Marvel started producing weaker works and DC rebooted their universe, so it felt like the right place to wrap things up. That guided Gowley's power progression. In the DC world, he went from quasi-supreme, holding a supreme status but not full power, to standard supreme, then to top-tier supreme, and finally to a universe-level power comparable to a full-strength Darkseid. After that, he transcended the universe. By the time he reached this level, over 90% of the major comic event bosses stood no chance. There was simply nothing left to make plausible opposition. At that point, even Perpetua couldn't defeat him. All the foreshadowing was used, and the remaining plot holes and settings were filled and explained. The story feels complete. I have no regrets. Thank you all for your support along the way. See you in the next book.